only a 5-second. It was only a 5-second applause. No, I wanted everyone to hear this. But it only lasted 5 seconds. Okay. Oh, now it's looping. Right. God, sorry, Will. I'm not doing this on purpose. Oh, and I've left the watch page on, and that's all I can hear. Bloody hell. Will, I'm sorry. I've absolutely ruined this. Let me just turn that off. That was a sham, and we're live, and I've ruined it completely, for God's sake. Will, I'm sorry. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's totally fine.
Jeez. All I wanted to do is have a bit of applause when you come in. I got it completely lost. There is one other thing I've got to do. For those who don't know the guest today, don't even remember that from the last time you were on. Listen, we'll get to the God stuff in a minute, but just all things TFE. I know you've got things going on there. Is there anything you want to shout out? I know you had like a GoFundMe or something for. Is there anything you want to shout out and get out there before we get into this?
Yeah. So we're making a documentary for the final experiment, and it turns out we couldn't get everything into 90 minutes. So we're changing it to a docu-series. I had already paid for the documentary, so it's going to cost money for all of the editors and the music guys and the sound guys and the color guys to fix it and make it into a 4-part docu-series. So we do have a GoFundMe. I'm going to be updating people on that soon, but I have 2 commitments that should come in next week. And if they do, we'll be over half the goal to go from a single standalone documentary to a 4-part docuseries. And everybody I talk to wants the whole thing. They don't want anything cut or left out. So thanks for mentioning that.
No problem. No problem. And any links that you want put in the description, if you send them me later on, I'll edit and put them in. We'll get to this. Stream came about because I put a community post out. I think it was Jake Rattlesnake. I don't really know the guy that well, but I think I was challenging him to a discussion or a debate about something. And Jake didn't reply, but Will popped up in the comments and said, "I'll have that discussion with you." I spoke to Will before, super articulate, super nice, super friendly. And I think last time we spoke, we were probably on the same side of something. Now we're on like kind of opposite sides of this discussion, but I'm sure it'd be nice and friendly. And I'm really looking forward to it. Somebody says my audio is a bit overdriven. Thanks. Hopefully that should be a bit better. Let me know if it isn't. So the discussion is just to chat about the existence of God. And we haven't really got together too much, have we, everyone's saying my audio is really loud. If it persists being an issue, let me know and I'll turn it down. We haven't really talked about the structure of the stream too much, have we? But we did agree that we both just say something at the beginning to lay out our own viewpoints. How do you want that to go, Will? Do you want to go first or second, or what's the plan?
How about you go first? I think that'd be great.
Okay, all right. I'm just turning my volume down a bit. People will have to let me know if that's now too quiet, because it was all a bit off. Right. What a disaster I've made it. I was really looking forward to this stream, and I've ruined it like completely. For God's sake, with all my tech issues. So, look, I'll start off by, if I'm going to have a discussion like this, obviously I don't believe in God, but I have to have this discussion from an honest position, right? And the honest position is, I know there are loads of people out there who have benefited because they have found a belief in God at some point in their life. There are people I know personally. There are people I follow online with big followings who maybe have been alcoholics or drug addicts or have been into crime, etc. They've found religion, they've found God, they've walked away from that, and they've completely turned their life around. And it's been super, super positive for them. And I wouldn't want to take that away from them. So, it doesn't. I don't take great pleasure in standing here and saying I don't believe in God, and I certainly wouldn't tell those people that they shouldn't. But from my point of view, and I know religion, organized religion, is not exactly the same as believing in God. I know they are slightly different things, but I think religion, organized religion, can be really, really bad. We look at some extreme communities, for example, within Islam, that would want Sharia law and all of the horrible, dangerous things that come with that. We look at Christian Science communities in kind of like Oklahoma, etc., and all the children who've died because those extreme communities have been praying and seeing prayer as being equal to medical intervention. And, you know, people can pick and choose good and bad bits from religion. And I understand I've done that there. But it does concern me that religion can have a really negative effect, not necessarily the belief in God, but the religion that comes with it. Now, in the UK, we've got a lot of controversy at the minute about backdoor kind of like blasphemy laws coming in to stop people kind of like mocking religion. And for me, in the UK, anyone who lives in the UK will know, you know, you look back things like Spit an Image and Mock the Week. This country has kind of been built on political satire, looking at political topics, satirizing them, you know, having a laugh at the politicians, etc. And that's all fine. And in my opinion, the exact same level of satire or acceptance of satire should be aimed at religion as well. I think as soon as we start putting religion and religious beliefs to a point where people think this should be protected, you shouldn't be able to mock or criticize, then we open ourselves to a position where people with strong religious beliefs feel more empowered to create laws and legislation and to act in a way that is harmful based on those religious beliefs. You know, we look over in the Middle East, you know, girls not being able to go to school or show their faces and that kind of thing. It's not something I'm keen on. Still, nevertheless, I'm not a believer in God, but a lot of people who watch my videos do believe in God, and I think they tolerate my videos because I point out some of the craziest views. So, Will, I'm sure you don't watch much of my stuff, but the other week I was featuring people that said that they could jump through a portal in the clouds to heaven, and when they were in heaven, they'd get on the back of a dragon and they would race God like it was a Formula One race thing. And then when you look in the bios and the websites of these people, they are selling like the tricks of how to get to heaven or how to speak to God for hundreds of dollars an hour, that kind of stuff. Or they're making huge amounts of ad revenue. So I really kind of like rip into that kind of thing and I mock that kind of thing. But I don't ever actually point to people and go, you know, Will, you believe in God? Ha, I don't do that kind of stuff because ultimately, and I said this to you in an email, and I said that I'd say this at the beginning, I can't prove God doesn't exist, right? I cannot prove there is no God. I simply can't do it. But when I say I can't prove there's no God, equally, like I can't prove that Donald Duck isn't up there in heaven with all the magic doing all of the same things. I can't prove that Mr. Fudge, you know, the waffle man isn't in the position with all that power. So it's to me, it's an unfalsifiable claim, and I can't falsify it. I can't disprove it. But I don't see any scientific evidence for it. So I am just interested in listening to people tell me either why they believe, and that could come in the form of offering proof and evidence, or just offering reasons why they believe. And it's just a conversation I want to have. It's not like a debate, because I can't, I've already held my hand up. I can't prove to Will that there is no God. I just don't think there's any evidence for one. And I think any evidence or reasons to believe Will might present tonight, and I don't know what they are, I think I could say they are equally valid proofs for Donald Duck or Mr. Fudge the Waffle Man as being a supernatural entity. So that's kind of like where I stand. And I don't really know where this conversation is going to go, because I know Will has prepared a lot of stuff and he's going to kind of lead the conversation. I think, or you've chaptered it up, haven't you, into different chunks.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think he's going to lead it with that, and we'll just see where the conversation goes. But that, I suppose that's like as honest as I can be in my position. This isn't a heated debate or anything like that. Anyway, that's me done. I've probably gone on for a while there. And if anybody's interested, by the way, it's Heineken 0%. I highly recommend if anyone's after a 0% lager. I might have to drive after this. Heineken, when it's cold, 0%. I'm not sponsored, but non-alcoholic Heineken. Anyway, that's me done. Sorry, Will. Over to you.
All right. Thank you so much. If you could go ahead and share my screen.
Absolutely.
I have to plan out what I'm going to say, All right. So Al and I are best known, I think, for debunking Flat Earth. The Culture Cats channel is largely a Flat Earth debunking channel, and that's obviously what the final experiment was. So, and that's actually how we met originally. Now, I wanted to start with what I learned from the final experiment, which is super important. And after watching a large group of people, these flat earthers, take such a strong stance against something that they really didn't know much about, I couldn't help but acknowledge where I do something very similar in my own life. The biggest area in my life where I was guilty of taking a very dogmatic stance against something I didn't really understand was evolution. And this led to my current series with Erica, better known as Gut Sick Gibbon. If you're not familiar with her, here's her channel. She's one of the foremost evolution educators on YouTube. She's probably the best educator on evolution, in my opinion. And so if you want to follow, she's actually teaching me evolution so that I can make a decision on whether or not I accept it after I've actually learned about it. Now, realizing that I've done this in my own life also made me aware that anyone can do this and take a dogmatic stance against something they know very little about. And I do think many atheists have done this very thing with God, namely taking such a dogmatic stance against the possibility that God exists while simultaneously being quite unfamiliar with the evidence. So, through the final experiment, it became abundantly clear that there were flat earthers who were earnestly looking for the truth. And these were the flat earthers who admitted they were wrong after being presented solid evidence of the 24-hour sun in Antarctica. But as it turns out, there were also flat earthers who were not seeking truth, and no amount of evidence will ever convince them they are wrong. These were the flat earthers who now claim our trip was fake or done in a studio, or that we were deceived with a fake sun from the government or even Satan. Now, Al, I truly believe that today is my opportunity to show you the equivalent of the 24-hour sun in Antarctica and more when it comes to the existence of God. And when any of us are presented with evidence that seriously challenges our beliefs, humans usually follow one of three different paths. First, they acknowledge they were wrong and accept the existing framework that accommodates the data, observations, and experiences. This one, unfortunately, is rare. This would be Jaron. So Jaron Campanella, who has a YouTube channel called Jaronism, he went with us to Antarctica, saw the 24-hour sun, and admitted I was wrong about flat Earth. The second thing people do is they actually acknowledge that the evidence does not fit their worldview, but they're hopeful it can be figured out eventually. This would be like Austin Whitsitt. He runs a YouTube channel called Whitsitt Gets It. He saw the 24-hour sun with his own eyes with us in Antarctica, but he's still hanging on, hoping someone can figure out how to make this work on a flat Earth. Lastly, the third thing people do is they create wild conspiracy theories. They reject the evidence outright, and they call into question those who experienced or made the observations. This would be like Flat Earth Dave, who says that the sun we saw in Antarctica was faked somehow, and also Dean Odell, who implied that Satan actually was the 24-hour sun we saw in Antarctica. Now, Al, I think this is super important before we start. What would convince you that God exists?
Okay, so I think I said to you in an email when we were setting this up, what would cause me a problem is if there were nailed on prophecies, and I'm not familiar with religious texts, right? You could very well catch me out tonight, and I'm sure you've done your homework because I did mention this, but you might find something in the Bible that is like a nailed on prophecy that absolutely come true, and it's not like a Nostradamus prophecy, which has to be twisted and distorted to be interpreted the way you want it. A nailed on like prophecy in the Bible that absolutely come true hundreds of years later. There's no explanation for it, and then I would have to think, well, how did that happen? Other than that, I'd have to witness actual supernatural activity, something that literally just I don't believe that science would ever be able to explain.
Okay, I think that's a great response. I do want to ask you, when you say witness, can you elaborate on that a little bit? Do you mean like in person or just witness evidence.
Yeah, witness evidence of, witness in person is a bit strong. I'd have to witness evidence of and be sure of the reliability of that source of evidence as well.
Okay, fantastic. I was anticipating you to say something different, and I'm glad you didn't. A lot of people say they'll only believe God exists if they have an experience with him in person. And it's interesting, you and I have experienced flat earthers saying they'll only believe in the globe if they walk on the moon themselves, or if they go to space or on the ISS. And that's just not, that's too high of a burden of proof. So I really appreciate your response. Okay. Now let me talk about the 6 lines of evidence that I'm going to be presenting, and then we'll talk about each of these one at a time. First is testimony and experience from countless people. This is something that I think is rarely talked about, and I think it's a very, very strong piece of evidence. Number 2 is the origin of life on Earth. Number 3 is consciousness. Number 4 is miracles. These are going to be confirmed and verified miracles. Number 5 is out-of-body experiences, again, confirmed and verified. And then finally, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, we're going to discuss these 6 lines of evidence individually, but I want everyone to keep in mind that atheism, naturalism, materialism, physicalism, whatever you want to describe your view as, they cannot account for any of them. Now, Al, since you are a science teacher, I will be quoting scientists, referencing the peer-reviewed literature, and using scientific reasoning and empirical data as often as possible for you and your scientifically minded audience. Sound good?
Yeah, I like the way let me start again. I like the way this is going. Before we get too further, I just want to acknowledge somebody's dropped a super chat, and then I'm absolutely going to reply to that. Mr. Present, talk about bad time in your word that Mexico are playing South Africa now. I don't know if you're a football fan, Will, but in America right now, it's the World Cup, and Mexico are kicking off. It's the first game. Thank you, Mr. President, very, very much for that. Okay, I tell you, thank you so much, Mr. President. That's very much appreciated. Will, I tell you why I like that is because I feel like you've structured whatever this is for me personally as almost like how can I put it? Not to try and convert me, but to really mentally challenge me. Right? When I see people like, and I don't want to slag anyone off here, this is a serious chat, but if I see people like Made by Jim Bob, he will just try and go around the houses with pre-planned philosophical arguments and lines of questions that whatever you answer, he's going to say, well, this means proof of God. He's got like a script he goes off. But I feel like you're taking a much different approach here, and you're gonna catch me out with lots of things, because if you're going to bring up scientific papers and events that are, I'm assuming, supposedly miracles, etc., I'm not going to be familiar with them, so I'm not going to be able to debunk anything here. I did say to you on the email, if there was stuff that I couldn't answer, I'll go away, I'll look at it, and I'll do a follow-up stream where I answer it. So you might not get, and I will do that. And I've got a feeling I'm going to have to do that, because I'm not going to be familiar with a lot of what you're bringing. But I feel I'm going to enjoy this. I think you're going to put it on me, and I'm not going to have a lot of responses, I think, to a lot of things you say tonight, but I'm looking forward to it.
Fair enough. All right. Well, let's dive in. If you could share my screen again. Also, I'm not watching the comments. I want everybody to know that. So if you have a question for me, we're going to have to do that at the end. All right. Let's start with testimony. So I want to spend quite a few minutes talking about this. Almost everything we believe is based on the testimony and experience of others. We don't naturally assume that everyone is lying to us, and therefore we need to verify everything that we are told. So, Al, starting with historical events, we don't second guess our parents when they tell us the story of how they met, when they got married, or where they went on their honeymoon. Even though you and I and the vast majority of people have never been to the moon or space, we don't reject their experience because we haven't experienced it ourselves. And we rightly criticize flat earthers for rejecting the testimony of those who have been to the moon or to space, even if it was just low Earth orbit. Mm-hmm. Now, in the medical world, even if we've never been personally diagnosed with cancer, HIV, diabetes, or hypertension, we believe others when they tell us they have been diagnosed with these conditions. And we also trust, without verifying, the claims that medications and procedures have been tested on either human or animal subjects and are therefore considered safe to use. In the arena of science, we trust the observations, experiments, and resulting data published in the peer-reviewed literature. And we do this despite the cases where people lied or manipulated data that ended up published and believed by the community. Here's an article, a recent article that was in the Wall Street Journal called "The Flood of Fake Science Forces Multiple Journal Closures." It says fake studies have flooded the publishers of top scientific journals, leading to thousands of retractions and millions of dollars in lost revenue. It even made Wiley, a 217-year-old publisher, close 19 journals. Some of them had large-scale research fraud. Now, there will always be people who lie and commit fraud, but this is not a reason to therefore distrust everything and reject the testimony of everyone. We have millions of people who have personal experience with God and whose lives have been radically changed due to their personal relationship with God. So many of these transformations confound the experts, as changes not deemed possible without intensive professional help happen immediately after something as simple as a single prayer. So, Al, it seems to me that refusing to accept the testimony and experience of others as evidence of God is at best inconsistent and at worst special pleading. What reason do you have for rejecting, if you do, the experience of others when it comes to God, while you accept the experience of others in all other areas of life?
It's a good question. Now, off the top of my head, what I would say is I don't reject when people say I had this really profound experience, right? And I believed that there was something supernatural or whatever reaching out to me. I don't reject that they truly believe they had that experience. What I want to see evidence of is that experience really caused by something supernatural? So I'm not necessarily doubting the testimony. When I say, when people say to me they had this dream, there's lots of people on TikTok who, and I don't cover these kind of things, but it's like people say, I had this, like my testimony video, I had this dream. God reached out to me and he spoke to me and I woke up and I felt this and I felt that. Well, I believe that they had that dream and I believe that it affected them in a certain way, but I don't believe that there's a supernatural cause for that. So it's not about doubting testimony. It's about is the way they are interpreting that experience correct or not? And I would then need to look at individual explanations. I was quite interested there actually, where you said that professionals said there've been transformations. And can you give us an example of one of the type of transformation you mean?
Sure. So you've got alcoholics, drug addicts, porn addicts. There's countless testimonies of people who, after giving their life to God with something as simple as a single prayer, wake up the next morning and never touch alcohol again, never touch drugs again, never look at porn again. And I was recently listening to a neuroscientist who has like almost 8 million subscribers on YouTube. I forget his name, maybe like Brian Huberman. And he prays. And he's like, guys, prayer works. He said, we can't explain this in the professional world where we tell people to try as hard as they can to get rid of their problems and they can't. But as soon as they say, I'm going to give this to God and I'm not going to try myself anymore, they're cured. He said, we can't explain that.
Right. So what I'm going to just get a little PowerPoint up so I can jot some of these things down, because I will do a stream where I kind of like respond to all this. But what I will say is I had a conversation with somebody who was a witch or wizard or whatever. Hang on. Psychology of prayer. I'll have to type that down before I forget it. Yeah, I did a podcast once with a guy called Ranty. Did you come across Ranty doing your flat earth stuff?
Yeah, he was someone who was no longer flat earth before TFE.
Yeah, well, when he kind of crossed over from being a flat earther to not a flat earther, me and him at that time, even though I was doing the conspiracy cat stuff, kind of like jibbing flat earth, and he was a flat earther, we had a podcast together where we came at it like Mulder and Scully, because he kind of believed a lot, and I was very skeptical. So we'd get people on that would talk about experiences they had, and we'd have an interview with them, and then I'd go away for like a week, and then me and Ranty would come back and we'd talk about whether we believed them or not, and I'd have done some research and tried to put like a rational spin on it. Anyway, one guy that we had on was a wizard. I say a wizard, he called himself a wizard. But someone's going to correct me. A pagan, I don't know, Wicker Man, but he was into all that magic stuff. And he said that he had these practices that he did every single day, and when he started doing them, suddenly his life fell into order. He got a job, he got a relationship he could hold down. He wasn't pissing his money up the wall, etc. He was his life completely changed. And when I can't remember the exact research I looked at, but the conclusion I came to was these practices that he did that he thought were magic. They weren't. They were kind of like resetting his brain into a really positive state. He thought, almost like placebo, he thought that he was benefiting from something divine and magical. So that just made him in the morning have a much more confident, positive outlook on life, and that affected the rest of his behavior. Which now at the minute, that's the closest kind of rebuttal I can give to what you said. But I will go away and I will have a look at examples of psychologists talking about the effect of prayer, and I'll have a look at that and I'll address it. But at the minute, that's the best I can give you.
Okay, thanks. I want to give you one other thing to think about, which I think is extremely powerful. I don't know if you've witnessed this. I honestly don't know what it's like in the UK, but in America, which is what I'm obviously the most familiar with, every Sunday morning, millions and millions and millions of people go to church and they sing praises to God. Hands in the air, literally singing praises to God. Now, there's no one, as far as I know, that's doing that with the flying spaghetti monster. What I'm going to suggest is that someone's going to have to experience something pretty radical to then come to a point in their life where they actually look forward to singing praises to God every single week. And it happens by the millions, on top of millions. And so what I'm suggesting to you is that something's happening here. It's no longer just an anecdote, and it's happening all over the world, not just in America. And there's got to be something pretty powerful there to have all these people doing something which would sound crazy to someone who doesn't believe God exists, that we are literally singing praises to him.
Let me flip that back on you, and I understand what you're saying. I do, but let me flip this back. When I was young, early teens, maybe 12, 13, something like that, I had adults in my life that wanted me to. I'd never been baptized, but they wanted me to get baptized, and they wanted me to get confirmed as well. And you can't get confirmed until you are baptized, and purely because I was a child and I didn't want to let these people down who I thought would be really disappointed. I went through with it. And on the back of that, I ended up having to go to church regularly for probably, I don't know, every month for about 2 years until I just couldn't handle it anymore. And all I can remember now, looking back then, is just how boring the whole thing was. I just remember waking up going to bed on a Saturday night thinking, oh, I've got to go there tomorrow. It's so boring. And I'd sit there and I was bored. And not once in any of those 2 years, like when I was even I'd done the whole thing. I've been baptized, confirmed. I went to church, and not once did I feel anything. So what I don't know. That's kind of like the opposite side of the coin.
Yeah. So your own testimony of your experience explains why you didn't have any feeling, and it's because your heart wasn't in it. From the very beginning, you were doing it to appease others, and you were doing it for them. So that's why. And I will admit there's boring churches for sure. So I want to plant seeds for you today that are going to really make you kind of think about everything in light of your current atheistic worldview.
Well, I mean, we're having a respectful chat on that, and I will reply to everything you say. I mean, for me, I could also say that people you get large numbers of people perhaps having these feelings in Mecca when they make the pilgrimage. I forget what the thing is called, but are they? I don't know. Are they having these feelings because of a different God that's the wrong one, or like how do you marry those two?
This is a really good question, and people need to realize something. This is super important. Everyone has things wrong about God. Every religion has things wrong about God. Do you know which religion has a ton wrong about God? Is Christianity. Now, I'm a Christian, and people are going to be confused why I'm saying that, but the proof is Christians can't agree on anything. They're in constant debates over the nature of God, over the Bible, over theology. So this is important. God's existence is separate from who has the most right about God. And so that's my response to that. And I think people need to keep that in mind. If you're truly seeking God, you're going to seek him and figure out A, if he exists, and then B, who he is, and not let people who disagree sway you from that.
Actually, I think I kind of semi-agreed with you on that in the beginning, in my opening statement, where I said, I don't really, I don't mind if people believe in God or not. I obviously don't, but I don't mind if people do. But it's the religion that comes with it that can be harmful, And I did agree with you as well, from the off that I've seen it myself. Some people do believe in God, and it has improved their life for the better. Again, I wouldn't put it down to a supernatural cause. I'd put it down to them believing they've got something to live for. They're being more positive. They're being more productive. They've got some kind of motivation to improve themselves. So I know it can do a lot of good, but the religion side of it,
I would also say that I look at myself, and this isn't, you have to do it this way, in my opinion, but I like evidence. And so I think I'm going to show today that the evidence is clearly on the side of God existing versus not.
Okay. Well, it's going well so far. It's going well. Is that point one down, or we?
Point one is down. Let's go to number two.
Let's go.
Ready for you to share my screen.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I keep forgetting I've got to do that. There we go.
All right. So let's talk about the origin of life. I love this topic. Life only arises from pre-existing life. Life has only ever been observed coming from other life. Science begins with an observation, and life from pre-existing life has been empirically verified, and there are no known exceptions. Now, scientific laws are established through repeated observations, experiments, and empirical data. The observations and data concerning life on Earth have led to the law of biogenesis, which states life only comes from other life. Now, most atheists believe in abiogenesis, which is the hypothesis that life arose from non-living matter. This position, in my opinion, is unscientific, as it violates the law of biogenesis and contradicts all known empirical observations in history. Now, people like to tell me in the science world all the time, Will, you got to trust the experts. You're not a scientist, trust the experts. Okay, great. So I'm going to do my best today through all of these points to trust the experts. Now, here's an expert who has a PhD in synthetic, organic, and organometallic chemistry from Purdue University, over 800 research publications, over 200 patents, and is the current TT and WF Chow Professor of Chemistry at Rice University. Now, of course, I'm talking about Dr. James Tour. The reason I kept his name off is because when I start with his name, and I mentioned Dr. James Tour, the same people that tell me to trust the experts say, Will, don't listen to him. He is an idiot. Here's what he says. And he is an expert, by the way. Primordial soup models are a bunch of nonsense. We have zero evidence for that. Exactly where we were in 1952 is exactly where we have remained. 1952 was the Miller-Urey experiment. He also says this: critical for life is the origin of information, DNA or RNA. The information is primary and the matter secondary, but we cannot even get the matter, the requisite carbohydrates, nucleic acids, lipids, and proteins, let alone the information. Now, I want to talk about this. Information is important. Random palm trees that have broken and coconuts on a beach is not information. But if you're flying over what looks like a deserted island, and those coconuts and palm trees are laid out in a digital code, here happens to be Morse code for the word help, you know there's an intelligent mind behind it, because that is information. Now, our DNA, we have thymine, adenine, cytosine, and guanine. Those elements, those molecules don't rearrange themselves into a double helix and at the same time into a digital code. That doesn't happen. The digital code in our DNA, that information clearly comes from an intelligent mind. Dr. Tour also says, try to build a cell, even hypothetically. A dream team cannot make a living cell if given all the chemicals in homochiral form and the informational code. Nobody can, nobody's ever done it. Nobody can do it. Dr. Michael Behe says, modern science has shown that the cell is an enormously complex nanoscale factory. And when you study biochemistry, you come across machinery, literally molecular machines. Here is an image I found online of a single eukaryotic cell, and the cell is wildly complex. It's literally a factory. Every year, we learn more and more about the cell and how complex it is. And in my opinion, no one should take the position that a literal factory is ever going to come about by chance. So we close out with this. Dr. Tour says, has science explained the origin of life? Not even close. The bottom line of it is we just don't know scientifically. We have no idea how life began. So let's talk about the origin of life.
Well, we don't know exactly how or where it began, or whether it began just in one place at one point or multiple places. What we obviously can do is we can trace back, and we can. So, for example, evolution and the age of the Earth, I think is absolutely nailed on. I know we'll disagree on that, but I think the science is absolutely there for that. But no, we can't say, in this pond, in this particular corner of the Earth, this is where the first nucleotide was formed, and so on and so on. But again, that doesn't mean that there was a supernatural origin. If we look at humans as a like scientific investigators, we only discovered DNA in the 100 years ago, or less than 100 years ago, that kind of thing. I can't remember the exact date. Or we only discovered the structure of DNA. Was it in the 1940s? I can't remember. We're still very, very young along that, so I can accept that there are absolutely holes in exactly how the life started. But again, I'd be a lot more inclined to believe there was a supernatural spark to that if there was evidence anywhere else for the supernatural. Will be my answer. So no, I can't explain exactly how that happened. Of course, I can't. I don't think anybody would claim to. What I would also say though is James Tour. Obviously, he's always been religious. He's always been a young Earth creationist who's come into science with that worldview. I don't think if you were to survey all the people who kind of worked in his field, I think he would end up in the vast, vast, vast minority in terms of his opinion. But yeah, that's my answer. But obviously, I'll address it in more detail in the follow-up stream. But you're just getting my gut reactions right now.
Okay, so Dr. Tour is definitely right on this one. Even if everybody wants to disagree with him, the more you watch his material, the more clear it becomes. So I'm not a chemist. I'm not a scientist. I know very little about this stuff, but I'll explain to you just some of the things I've learned from him. So we have this problem in origin of life research, which is known as the homochirality problem. And in life, almost all life, it's like practically everything except for maybe one exception is homochiral, which means that the handedness is the same. So all amino acids are left-handed, all sugars are right-handed. And so that's required for life. Everything that's been done in origin of life research ends up with what's known as a racemic mixture, which is 50-50 right and left-handed. So I would say nothing's been solved. There's not holes in this. It's a giant hole.
Well, I'd absolutely say we don't know how it began. What I'd like to counter you with that is, and you're probably going to like say you don't agree with the evidence of evolution, but to me the evidence is really firm and it's really there, and that contradicts the kind of like biblical explanation of Adam and Eve and the rib, etc. So, I mean, with all this stuff you've done with Erica, and I haven't seen the latest one, would you still say that you don't believe in evolution at all? Like if I was to say to you, going back to fish in the ocean, that kind of thing, do you, or swimming things in the ocean, not today's fish?
I don't want to feel like I'm avoiding you, but this is not related to origin of life. And I'm waiting until I get the full education from Erica before I make a decision on whether or not evolution is true. So right now, I'm completely open. I will say there's a large group of Christians known as theistic evolutionists that believe in God and evolution. So evolution inherently has nothing to do with the existence of God. And I want to point out one more thing, which is super crucial for you and your audience. If the Bible turns out to be false, that has no bearing whatsoever on the existence of God. Zero. God doesn't exist because of the Bible.
Okay, a couple of things there then. The reason I brought it up was because and it's all right, I understand you, any kind of reveal you want to make on your position on evolution should be done on Erica's channel. So I'll not press you for an answer, but I will tell you why I brought it up. Because if you are of the opinion that evolution has occurred, then we can take, which I think is definite in terms of all the evidence, then we can take that back to a point so far back that the whole kind of Adam and Eve and bone thing just is irrelevant. It just doesn't fit in to evolution whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like why I brought that up. I forget what the other thing you said was now. I had two things in my head. What if I missed? What was the other thing you said?
I don't know.
Here's the Bible being wrong wouldn't disprove God. The Bible. Okay. But to me, the Bible, again, and I won't push you for an answer on this, but if I was to bring up this, one of the reasons lots of people are young earth creationists is, why is that not being shown? Oh, I don't know why that's appearing behind us. Anyway, what that is a list of the genealogy, the ages that you would use to calculate 6,000 years. And you'll see people living for like 150 years, 90 years, 900 years or whatever, like these crazy kind of like never seen before long lifespans that that young earth creationists use to go back 6,000 years. Now, that is the reason people don't believe in evolution, because you're using the genealogy of the Bible to go back to 6,000 years, and then you think there's not enough time for evolution, therefore it must be creation, in my opinion anyway. But if the Bible is possibly wrong, right, then in your opinion, then that is possibly wrong. So why not rely on the scientific evidence for evolution and just jump into that? I'm not asking you to give me an answer because I know you want to do that reveal on Eric's channel.
No. Christians I know are wrong about a ton, and I know that because I'm intimately familiar with them. The theological debates are insane, and they all disagree with one another. But this is important. If the whole Bible turns out to be false, that has no bearing on God's existence whatsoever. I see people say why they don't believe in God, and they're not valid reasons. Someone in the comments before we started said that they read the Bible and it's all BS, and therefore God doesn't exist. That's not a valid argument. So God's existence is irrespective of whether or not the Bible's true.
And just to throw something else at you, obviously, we're talking about the Bible, and I think you touched on it before when you said, in your opinion, lots of religions have got things about God wrong. Are you claiming that all the religions, then, in your opinion, are believing in the same entity?
I don't know what these religions believe, but if they are searching for the uncreated creator of the universe and then making declarations about that God, then to that extent, yes. But again, everyone has things wrong about God. Everyone will. This needs to be about God's existence, whether or not that's objectively true. regardless of what people believe.
Do you think it's possible, in your opinion, that abiogenesis could have occurred and we just don't know how to explain it yet?
Absolutely not. So here's why. Imagine when we landed on the moon. Imagine they went to the dark side of the moon, which they didn't. And there was a factory there, a factory that was building things. Everybody would believe that there are aliens, including you. So you would see that and say, you know what? That cannot happen by chance. There's an intelligent mind behind that. And I'm asking you to be honest with yourself about the origin of life, the complexity of the cell, and the fact that it's a digital code information behind it. This clearly is evidence that it came from a very powerful mind.
I understand what you're saying. And again, I'm trying hard because this isn't a debate, right? And we've lined this up as a friendly discussion. I know a lot of people in the chat will probably ask you some questions later on and want to probe a little bit harder. There will be a follow-up stream to this where I go into more detail, prepare stuff. But for me, let's just look at DNA, for example. There's nothing stopping, or RNA to start with. There's nothing stopping that molecule, in my opinion, coming together naturally. The first time we find a molecule of mRNA, for example, or however the genetic material was abiogenesis, it's not necessarily at that point containing information. It's just a molecule with bases in a certain order. But then as things progress, that order then through kind of like, just random selection and chemistry begins to be used as a template in which it's kind of given the identity of having information, if you like. It's not a molecule that is initially created with a code in it. It's a molecule that's created and then it is used, the things around it develop to use it as a code. I'm probably not explaining that very well, but in the stream that follows up, I'll articulate that a lot better.
I'm a fan of someone named William Dembski. You guys don't need to know who he is. He's a mathematician. He's very bright. He wrote a book. And at the beginning of the book, he said, I want you guys to imagine a scenario where some people win a trip to space. And they actually end up not going to space. They actually end up going down into a single cell. But they are knocked out or whatever so that they don't know what's happening. When they get inside the cell and they think they're in space, they interpret it as the technology we see is far exceeds anything we could ever dream of here on Earth. And the reality is that to me, what makes the most sense is to look at something that's this complex. Let's also admit that evolution got this wrong. They predicted the cell would be simple and rudimentary. We should look at something that's this complex, that's very difficult for all of our minds to understand, and is run by a digital code, which I don't think we have any examples of that haven't come from a mind, and say it's a reasonable thing to think that this came from an intelligent being.
Look, the cell is massively complicated. The bit about evolution, obviously, evolution is making predictions in the past before even the microscope existed. So when I think when the cells were invented, I can't remember the guy's name. He was looking at cells were invented. Sorry, when cells were discovered, guy was looking at a piece of cork under a microscope, and he was like, well, these are the building blocks of life. We don't really know much about them. And, at that point, way back then, they're making suggestions and predictions and stuff. But, they were living in a completely different, far less sophisticated scientific era. So for them at the time to assume, I'm sure these are very, very basic things with no machinery inside them, etc. I think it's, we're probably being a little bit harsh on them to say, well, they got it wrong, therefore evolution got it wrong, etc. I think that's a little bit harsh. But I do understand what you're saying. If you look at something like the cell, it is absolutely magnificent. You have some fantastic, amazing structures in there that do absolutely brilliant things. So I understand. I've got a master's degree in biology, and obviously I've looked at genetics and the mechanisms inside cells quite a lot in my younger days. And it always fascinated me. I think it's brilliant. But again, I don't look at that and see that is evidence of the supernatural. At the beginning of the video, video at the beginning of the stream, he said, what would convince me? And, I said, real evidence that, biblical text has made predictions that have come true that aren't fluffy predictions, or real evidence of like a miracle or supernatural activity. And I still kind of hold to that. I think all this cell machinery and evolution, I don't have a problem believing that come around through evolution. I really don't. And I think when you look back with I won't turn this into evolution debate, but I think if you look back at all the evidence and genetic evidence, for me, it's overwhelming. I know it's not for you, but for me, it is overwhelming. But I will address that more. And I'll look at what James Torr has got to say when I do the follow-up stream.
Awesome. And by the way, you're in luck because, by the way, you didn't tell me the second part of what would convince you God exists until live today. And so I was kind of shooting in the dark here, trying to figure out what might reach you. And so you're in luck because I am going to give you what you're asking for. Perfect. But before we get to that, if you want to share my screen, let's talk about consciousness.
Okay.
And I want people who are watching this to realize that I'm making a very strong cumulative case here. So if you want to try to get a criminal off, you want to try to poke holes in each piece of evidence and get the jury to forget about the big picture. So I want everybody to make sure you're remembering the big picture here, which is, why do we have millions of people who claim this personal experience and relationship with God, whose lives are transformed? And we really haven't figured out the origin of life. And then next is consciousness. So consciousness is something we all experience and recognize. It's your awareness of yourself and the world around you. Consciousness is the ability to have subjective experiences. It's what it feels like to be you, and it's what separates a living, feeling person from a rock, a video game character, or even someone in a very deep coma. Now, I'm bringing the experts, as I said. This is Tim Maudlin, who's the professor of philosophy at New York University. He's the founder and director of the John Bell Institute for the Foundations of Physics. And he's one of the world's leading philosophers of physics. Here's what he has to say about consciousness. I don't think physicalism or materialism in a certain definition has a chance of being correct because it's evident that consciousness exists. As Descartes would have said, I'm more sure about that than I am that the physical world exists. For those who aren't familiar with Rene Descartes, he's famous for, I think, therefore I am. And he came to the conclusion that he could be more sure about his consciousness than even the physical world existing, and that it was possible that he existed but was in a vat, essentially, like a brain in a vat connected to something else. So this is how sure we can be that consciousness exists. Next expert is David Chalmers. He has a PhD in philosophy and cognitive science from Indiana University, professor of philosophy and neuroscience at New York University, co-director of NYU's Center for Mind, Brain, and Consciousness, and the co-founder of the Association for the Scientific Study of Consciousness. Here's what he has to say. I was trained as a scientist. My attitude was that materialism had to be true, and there was just this little problem reconciling materialism with consciousness. Only over time have I begun to think this is more and more of a problem. In fact, maybe it's impossible to reconcile consciousness with materialism. Back to Tim Maudlin. I don't think that physics has the resources within it to explain or account for the existence of conscious states, and the connection between the existence of conscious states and the physics of our brains is completely opaque. There's no conceptual connection at all. He also says, I think there's a reason this is called the hard problem, because I think it's the hardest problem there is. Every sketch for a kind of solution seems to lead to certain absurdities. And he said, if you ask me what will give me explanatory closure or something that's really explanatorily satisfactory here, I can't think of an approach which even in principle would give it. Now, if you're not familiar with the term hard problem, this is known as the hard problem of consciousness. There's also something known as the easy problems of consciousness, and the names are a bit of a misnomer. These are not solved. The easy problems are not easy. The reason it's called the hard problem is because they can't even figure out a hypothetical way to solve it. The easy problems, which have not been solved, are called easy because they can at least think of potential ways to solve it, but they still haven't solved it. Now, back to David Chalmers. He's actually best known for coining these terms, hard problem of consciousness and easy problems of consciousness, in his 1995 paper, Facing Up to the Problem of Consciousness. But David Chalmers is also known for winning a 25-year bet with neuroscientist Christoph Koch. Now, this was covered in New Scientist magazine. It was called The Consciousness Wager. And in 1998, Koch bet a case of fine wine that within the next 25 years, someone would discover a specific signature of consciousness in the brain. Chalmers said it wouldn't happen and bet against him. And Nature published this article in June of 2023. Decades-long bet on consciousness ends, and it's philosopher 1, neuroscientist 0. And let's give Christoph some credit. He brought a case of fine wine and paid up to David Chalmers for losing this 25-year bet. Now, we also have to talk about one more expert, which is Dr. Michael Egner. He's the professor of neurosurgery and pediatrics at the State University of New York, Stony Brook. He has performed over 7,000 brain surgeries over his 45-year career, and he's the author of The Immortal Mind, a neurosurgeon's case for the existence of the soul. He taught me in his book about split brain surgery. So there's a last resort brain operation called a corpus callosotomy, where the corpus callosum, which is the massive bundle of nerve fibers that connects the two hemispheres of the brain, is cut in half. Here is a paper that was a study done by Yair Pinto. So these surgeries are done usually for people who have serious epilepsy, because it prevents a seizure from going from one hemisphere to the other. So it drastically reduces the effect of these seizures. Well, it brings up an interesting question. If consciousness comes from the brain, what happens when you split the brain in half? The most interesting thing about this study is they would show one side of the brain one image and the other side of the brain another image. And the two hemispheres of the brain physically cannot communicate with one another. And these patients were able to explain the story of what they were shown. Here's a hypothetical example. One hemisphere would be shown a baseball, the other hemisphere would be shown a broken window, and the patients were able to say, you're trying to tell me that a baseball broke the window, but one hemisphere could not talk to the other. How much brain does the mind need? This was a patient of Dr. Egner's. Her name was Katie. And when she was born, she was missing most of her brain. As you can tell there's very little brain. The dark area is all spinal fluid, water, essentially. And what's interesting is Katie grew up to be a bright, happy child. And I see her for a routine examination every year. This is from the book. At every stage of her life, she's excelled. She sat and talked and walked earlier than her twin sister, and she made the honor roll in high school. As far as I know, they've never done anything medically for her. Here's another case published in The Lancet, which is called The Brain of a White-Collar Worker. This is a 44-year-old who had mild left leg weakness, and it turns out he's missing, they estimate, between 50 to 75% of his brain. And he came to the doctor with mild left leg weakness, married with 2 children and a regular job. So it's interesting, right? If we think consciousness is coming from the brain, but you're missing most of your brain, it doesn't seem to affect consciousness. So when the brain is split in half or largely absent or shut down, the human person is still present in whole, not in part. And there is no evidence that consciousness resides in any specific area of the brain. So let's have a conversation about consciousness.
I've got 3 points. Just while they're fresh in my mind, can I bullet blast them at you, if that's a term? And then, because I might forget. So that last thing you said, the person's still there as a whole, if even if some or part of the brain is missing. I mean, I think we're all aware that brain damage, serious brain damage, will show that the person can lose a lot of their faculties, a lot of their a lot of their personality. Even lobotomies will change your personality. Going back to the Dark Ages, you behave differently. It's not as if you're reasoning or seeing things in the same way once you've had a lobotomy. So I think that counts as that, but obviously you can come back at me with it. You said earlier on at the beginning about consciousness being linked to people having subjective experiences. Would you say that's one of the stronger pieces of evidence for a consciousness existing, that people are subjective with the way they...
Yeah, well, so yes, we all experience consciousness. So I think consciousness, just right off the bat, is something that everyone experiences, and so everyone agrees exists.
Okay, but when you mentioned the subjective experiences, where does that fit in? Or was that kind of, have I just picked that out and it wasn't really that relevant?
Well, no, I mean, we do have subjective experiences, right? There's something that it means to be Al, and there's something that it means to be Will. And only you experience what it means to be Al, only I experience what it means to be Will. And our experience and who we are remains the same, even though our physical body is constantly changing.
Okay, so when I was younger, I had 2 cats, right? And they were so drastically different to the point where we would have to buy each one different cat food, because subjectively, one of them hated one brand and the other one hated another. That we couldn't find the cat food that they both liked, so they had different cat food. One of them would love to jump up and sit in our knee and be stroked. The other one was very wary of people and just wanted to sit down at your feet, and never vice versa. One of them would like to come upstairs at night and jump on the beds. The other one would want to stay downstairs. One of them will be scratching to get out the house and run around for 8 hours and then come back. And the other one would only want to go out, to have a wee and a poo and then come back in. The same, they lived in the same environment, right? But they had very different personalities. They had very different tastes. Subjectively, you could say when they were eating whatever food it was, one of them found it a great experience, one didn't. One, subjectively, the garden was the same. So objectively, the garden was the same, but one of them wanted to go out in it. The other one didn't want to go out in it. So how is that different? Like, how have those cats not got consciousness?
They do.
Would that not mean then, if we're talking about that they are spiritual, under the argument I think you're making, correct me if I'm wrong, but would that not mean that they're also spiritual beings?
No, no, that's not what I'm saying. So
Okay.
you're making a good point. I need to be more clear what I'm doing. I am systematically right now breaking down the foundations of your worldview. That's what I'm doing. I'm breaking down this idea that nature is all there is, that there's only physical things. And so there is no explanation. We can trust the experts on this. There's even a term for it. There is no explanation, I think there never will be, of why matter would become self-aware. That is a gap that cannot be crossed. And so that's what I'm talking about, is that there is no physical explanation for this. And so we need to be open to the fact that there's something else going on here, probably a very powerful being that is responsible for this, because there is no natural explanation.
So, okay, so forget what I was saying about the cats. I've misread what you were saying.
Okay.
I'll two other points then. One, and what I'm saying now is a guess, right? I'm not saying I'm writing this, but it's a guess. And you were talking about the brain being split down the middle and one and still being able to kind of like communicate. So if you follow the neurons that are coming down from the brain into the spine, they are connected via kind of like intermediate neurons to each other. There is a linkage, but it's not a linkage in the head. There's a linkage through the spinal column. Now, I know that physical linkage exists. I'm not saying that is why they could communicate. I'm saying that is my best guess at the minute, and I'll have to go and have a look and a research at that, because that's just my best guess. And the last one was, yeah, with that. This whole thing kind of reminds me of the tag argument for God. And, to me, consciousness is just a byproduct of the way the brain functions, just like a flame isn't a real thing. A flame is just evidence of combustion, if you like. Combustion happens and then we have a flame, and, you can't pick up a flame and take it home and use it. Maybe we can make similar arguments for computer software running inside a system, being able to do things and process all sorts of information. But it's to me, I don't have any issues thinking that the brain has evolved certain functions, and when neurons are working in a certain way, it's experienced as a consciousness. I don't particularly have a problem with that. But I am interested in the brain splitting down the middle, and I did guess about the relay thing. I'll admit that was a complete guess, so I will go and have a look at that.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's clear, which is why this problem exists, is that the current theories don't work, just like with origin of life. The issue with saying that consciousness comes from the brain is there's so many issues, right? One of them is this split brain thing, which is that, and by the way, that neuroscientist Christoph Koch, he said in a debate with Michael Egner on Michael Shermer's YouTube channel, by the way, if you guys want to watch that, it was a slaughter. He said that in a split brain surgery, it now becomes two people. So that's a world famous neuroscientist saying that. It's not true. You can talk to these split brain patients. That's number one, that there seems to be a unified consciousness. Number two is the idea that it's coming from the brain or parts of the brain or a bunch of parts of the brain altogether. The reason that has no traction is because if I were to ask, of course, not you, but any neuroscientist, and by the way, I did ask a neuroscientist this on YouTube a couple weeks ago, what parts? Because the reason he can't answer or no one can answer is because I can go show you somebody who's missing that part. There are people now who are missing so much of their brain and different parts of their brain that if you were to actually say it's these parts coming together that are creating consciousness, I can show you somebody who's conscious that doesn't have those parts. So again, I think people should realize, like, I think there's this idea out there that there's no need to believe in God because there's a natural explanation for everything. And that's just completely false. There isn't a natural explanation for these things. And consciousness is beautiful because it's something that we all experience, right? Let me say this real quick for people to understand, if to help them click with this. If I told you, Al, make me a robot, and if someone drops a bowling ball on the robot's foot, the robot will say, ouch, 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 jump up and down and grab his foot. You could do that. We all can imagine that. But if I said, Al, I want you to make me a robot that actually feels pain, no one would have any clue where to even start. Like, this is the power of consciousness. And again, I'm claiming right now there will never be a solution to this problem because matter itself can never become self-aware. It just can't.
Okay. I will get that on the list. And again, for anyone watching in the chat, this isn't a debate. This is a conversation between two people with different views. Will's come on here to present his reasons for believing in God, and I've not. There was no heads up here, right? So he's not told me what these reasons are going to be. But I will come back and I will answer every single one, or maybe I won't. Maybe I won't be able to. But I will do a stream in a couple of weeks, and I will address all these in a lot of detail. And then, Will, you can tell me in the comments why I'm wrong.
Okay.
But just to add to that, then, obviously, if somebody gets a severe whack to the head, they can die. Mm-hmm. So how does that fit in with parts of brains missing, but yet they're still the same person?
Sure. So this is an important piece. The brain is the interface between our consciousness, what I would call our soul, and our body. And so if the brain is harmed enough, then yes, you're going to maybe have difficulty speaking, difficulty moving, or you could die, right? The important thing is that when it comes to the intellect and the will, that is what science has never found anything in the brain that is responsible for that. The intellect and the will seem to be separate from the brain, but again, the brain is required. So the best analogy I have for this is you need a computer to get on the internet, right? The internet exists, but if you crack your screen on your computer, you can still get on the internet. It's just a little bit more difficult. But if you break your computer enough, you can't get on the internet anymore because the internet is separate, but you still need that computer as that interface.
So is this, I'm going to ask you another question in a second, but is this your kind of like the way you personally view it, or is this something that is in the theistic community? Is this something that's quite widely believed?
I think I don't have a good answer for you. I'm not. I learn from people and I try to retain it and then I spew it out. So I get stuff from everybody else, but I'll answer you in this. I think this is what makes the most sense to everybody based on not only our personal experience, but also the scientific evidence.
And the way you're explaining it to me, I've got to ask them, if your brain is kind of connecting to your soul, and the way you put it, like, where would your soul live, and could we evidence that?
Yes. We'll get to that in 2 more categories.
Okay. Right.
All right.
It's interesting. It's going to be interesting. Again, lots of people in the chat. Will has said he's happy to take questions from you, but that will come at the end. You don't need to super chat to ask the questions, but obviously there will be a time limit on how long we've got for that. So if you do have questions, you want to challenge him on it. I'm not challenging him on anything tonight. It's just he's going to come and he's going to say his piece. I'll address it in a couple of weeks, but you might have some challenging questions that you want to ask soon. If that's okay with you, Will, yeah?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
All right. The next one's your favorite here. So let's talk about miracles.
Perfect.
So this is important. Al, before I show evidence of verified and confirmed miracles, it's crucial that you tell me what you would accept as solid evidence that a miracle happened. What made the final experiment so successful was that nearly all flat earthers took the position publicly that the 24-hour sun in Antarctica was not real. So what would you accept as evidence a miracle occurred?
It would have to be something that I mean, on the spot, it's difficult to think of a particular, without thinking of a very specific example, it's difficult to think of an explanation, but it would have to be something that required some kind of supernatural input. But so I suppose, say, science can't explain it, but also science can't explain a lot of things at the minute. We're unfolding a lot of mysteries, aren't we? We're digging into a lot of mysteries as we become more and more sophisticated. So maybe some that science can't explain yet wouldn't fit, but it would have to be something that convinced me there was supernatural involvement, I suppose, is the best I can give you.
Okay. I think I'm gonna provide that for you today. Okay. Now I'm gonna go over one miracle here, and then I want to get your take on it before I go over the next one. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Here we go. Okay. Now, believe it or not, this is going to come as a shock to a lot of people. There is no shortage of miracle accounts in modern history, and to satisfy the science-minded out there are miracles verified by medical professionals at some of the most prestigious medical institutions. There are miracles that have been published in the peer-reviewed literature. And there are even miracles which have been caught on camera. So in my opinion, there's really no excuse to not accept this. And again, just because of my connection to Al through the flat earth debunking, there's plenty of evidence now of this 24-hour sun in Antarctica that there's really no reason or excuse to reject it. All right, we're going to talk about Barbara Comiskey. Now, she was diagnosed by the Mayo Clinic with multiple sclerosis at age 15. She lost the ability to walk at age 24. By 30, she had a paralyzed diaphragm, collapsed lung, frequent pneumonia, tracheostomy tube for breathing, and she was on oxygen dependency. She was legally blind, severe tremors in arms and hands, and her body was contracted into the fetal position. She had paralysis of the intestinal tract, ileostomy with a bag, and loss of bladder and bowel control. She had a feeding tube because she couldn't swallow. Her muscles atrophied after not having walked for 7 years. At 31, she was put on hospice palliative care at home with a no resuscitation order. On Pentecost Sunday, June 7th, 1981, 2 friends were praying over her and reading scripture. Barbara heard a booming, authoritative voice say, "My child, get up and walk." Her friends did not react and did not hear the voice. She stood up from the bed, fully and instantaneously healed. Her vision was restored. Her atrophied muscles were restored. Her lungs were reinflated back to normal. There was a church service that night at her church, Wheaton Wesleyan Church, and she went to church and walked down the aisle in front of everyone, and many of them had only known her curled up in a wheelchair. Now, one of her surgeons, Harold Adolph, said this: "Barbara was one of the most hopelessly ill patients I ever saw. She was diagnosed at the Mayo Clinic as having multiple sclerosis. She had been admitted to the local hospital 7 times in the year that I was first asked to see her. Each time she was expected to die. One diaphragm was completely paralyzed so that the lung was non-functional, and the other worked less than 50%. She had a tracheotomy tube in her neck for breathing. always required extra oxygen, and could speak only in short sentences because she easily became breathless. Her abdomen was swollen grotesquely because the muscles of her intestine did not work, nor would her bladder function. She had not been able to walk for 7 years. Her hand and arm movements were poorly coordinated, and she was blind except for 2 small areas in each eye. Dr. Harold Adolph said this was completely unexpected. There is nothing I can explain on the basis of medicine. It was a miracle. Another doctor, Dr. Thomas Marshall, said, I have never witnessed anything like this before or since, and considered it a rare privilege to observe the hand of God performing a true miracle. Barb has gone on to live a normal life in every way. And Dr. Donald Edwards said, there is no medical test to explain what has happened. There is no neurological trace of her problem. The proof is time. So this is the first miracle. And this is obviously a very powerful one. You can watch interviews of her on YouTube. It's fully documented. We have multiple physicians. It's documented at the Mayo Clinic, and she lived a completely normal life. People are not healed like this instantaneously ever.
Okay, right. So a story like that, taken at face value, is obviously very difficult to explain away. It's the first time I've heard of her. So let's say that she was at death's door. She had all these, her lungs and her muscles and all that were absolutely shot to pieces. And, this was almost like a restructuring of almost like it sounds like an instantaneous restructuring of organs in the body is what this sounds like. Would you agree with that? Or
yes, everything was fully healed in an instant.
Okay, so taken at face value, if it is true that somebody's internal organs instantly restructured and healed them, then I obviously would class that as a miracle. I obviously would. Okay, if taken at face value. Now, this is the first time I've heard of the lady. You won't be surprised to hear that I am pretty skeptical about it. But I will obviously go and research, and I'll have a look at it, and I will come back with what I find in the response stream. I'm obviously skeptical. The one thing I'd like to ask is, if this is true, and people who are praying over the sick will, can improve the sick. If we look at the Christian Science community, which I mentioned earlier on, that very small, I'm sure you're aware of them. I know you're not part of it, but you were, yeah. So I think it was Oklahoma for a while. I think the loophole has been closed now, but it was considered child negligence if you didn't intervene when a child was sick. But one of the interventions that was allowed was prayer. So as long as you prayed, you didn't have to intervene medically. And in that community, the Christian science community took that to heart, and a lot of children died of things like dehydration, measles, things that they could have been cured with just simple antibiotics. I think there was 192 child deaths from very, very curable things over a 20-year period. But they were being given prayer by people that genuinely believed. So why do we not see this kind of thing more often, especially in the communities that kind of live by that sword?
Yes, I'm really glad you brought this up. This is probably going to be the most important part of our entire conversation. People who are scientifically minded think through the lens of, if I do X, this happens. And that's what science says, right? Water boils at this temperature every time based on elevation. That is not how miracles work. Okay, so Christianity nor these other theologies are stating that if you pray, you'll be healed. That's 100% not what we're saying. Biblically, miracles, especially healing miracles, were rare, and they're still rare. The question then becomes, why does God heal some and not others? Now, I sympathize with that question, and I'm not going to avoid it, but I have to say something first, which is crucial. Whether or not we can ever get into the mind of God and understand why he heals sometimes and not others has no bearing whatsoever on his existence. We cannot say that because God healed Barbara and he didn't heal my mother, he doesn't exist. That's a fallacious argument. God exists regardless of that situation. Now, if we are trying to solve a crime, right? we're trying to figure out why the criminal did what he did. Unless he tells you, you're never going to know. You can speculate all day long, but it's never going to be a valid argument or a defense for some murderer of, well, yes, the evidence shows he did murder this person, but he didn't murder anybody else. He still murdered the person. So this is a confirmed and verified miracle. It is evidence of the supernatural and of God. And the question of why was Barbara healed and not other people is a separate issue that really has no bearing on the existence of God.
Okay, I mean, I'll accept that even just one occasion like that, if it's genuine, is all that's needed. Okay, I'll accept that. I am skeptical that this actually happened, but obviously that's all I can say at this point. I can't, because it's the first I've heard of it. I can't say anything else other than I am highly skeptical. But again, I've promised you in the emails. I promised you on stream. I will do another one where I go through all these arguments and I tell you what I think. Then post properly researching them all. Okay.
Okay, great.
That's all I can promise.
Okay, what I want you to do when you're researching it, and I fully respect your opinion. I fully respect your method of wanting to validate it. What I want you to keep in the back of your mind as you're researching these miracles and these accounts that I'm going to be giving you is I don't want to be like a flat earther. I don't want to say everybody's lying. I don't want to say it's fake, yada, yada, yada. And I think what you're going to find is that you can document it. Sorry, you can verify it with medical documents. We're going to have multiple doctors testifying to it. You can talk to her family. You can watch interviews of her, etc. So I think it'll be strong. All right. If you want to share my screen, we'll go to the next one.
Let's do it.
All right. This is the story of James Drain. This particular miracle is very recent. And this is going to sound weird to say, but for some reason, this one has really captivated me and even my wife. When we learned about it, we were both bawling, essentially. So James was in Mensa before graduating high school. He became a chemist, and he was exposed to methanol as a chemist, and he even admitted that he was not as careful as he should have been. He woke up one morning with no feeling in his legs from the knees down, and he started developing visual issues. Well, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at age 25. He lost vision completely in his left eye. He had very little vision in his right eye. He lost his driver's license, obviously, due to his vision issues. He struggled walking and started using a cane. He would often collapse while walking. And his condition worsened, and he eventually had to start using a wheelchair. He became depressed and suicidal. He turned to drugs and alcohol. He ended up divorced. And he couldn't even work one regular shift at work. And by the way, he had 210 employees under him. Mm-hmm. A friend said, "I'm not asking, I'm telling you that you're coming to church with me." And he gave his life to God, and he turned his life around. Now, he decided to get baptized as he had rededicated his life to Jesus. And he got baptized at Grace Apostolic Church in Clawson, Michigan on August 14th, 2023. So less than 3 years ago. And the church did not film their baptisms, but a church member named Carissa Saber felt moved to film it with her cell phone. She literally just walked up and started filming it, the baptism, with her cell phone. You have to see with your own eyes what happened next. Now, by the way, this video is not copyrighted or anything. You're not going to get any strikes for that. I want everybody to watch it first without any commentary from me, and then we'll watch it again, and I'll explain to you not only what's happening, but what he said. And I think it'll be pretty obvious what's happening.
Right. I'll just put it on full screen.
You can read lips if you'd like. Okay. I think you can obviously see what happened, but now I want to explain what's going on. So he was baptized, she's filming, and he all of a sudden started noticing that he could see. And he was in shock and he didn't know what to make of it. So he turns to the pastor right now and he says, "Don't say anything yet. I think I might be imagining things." And he told the pastor, "I don't know what's going on, but I can see." And you can read his lips here. He says it twice. Here comes the first one. "I can see." He's like freaking out. He's like, "What is going on?" And then he says it again. "I can see." He's like, "Yeah, I can definitely see." Right here, he points to flags in the back of the sanctuary. He's never seen the sanctuary or anything, and he has perfect vision at this point. So James went into the water blind and with multiple sclerosis, and he came out of the water with his vision restored and completely cured of MS. Anybody that knows anything about MS, you never get cured of MS. He now drives the church van and drives seniors from the local senior facility to church on Sunday. And in a beautiful turn of events, he helps the seniors who struggle to walk get from the facility to the vehicle so that they can attend church. You have to see his account, the full story, including the interviews with him, the pastor who baptized him, Carissa, who filmed it on her cell phone, his friends, everything. You got to see it. There's a documentary about it called Miracle on Angel Studios. It's episode 2. So, Al, this is powerful. This is a miracle that was caught on film.
Hey, listen, like with the first one, if he's had some kind of instantaneous structural change to his body that has fixed a problem, then obviously that's very, very difficult to explain away. All I can say is similar to the last one. It's the first I've heard of it. I'm obviously initially very skeptical, but I don't have obviously any kind of answer to that until I look at it. But it's an interesting one. I'll enjoy researching it. I will enjoy researching it.
Okay, awesome. And by the way, the documentary includes medical records, discussions with doctors. He literally was in a wheelchair and blind. I mean, I think he was like 98% blind, 100% in one eye and almost fully in the other eye. And he gets baptized, and as soon as he comes out of the water, he's got fully restored vision in both eyes and no multiple sclerosis. So I really do think, I want you to research this, but I really think I've met your burden. And so I'm super interested in what you're going to say.
Well, I was going to ask a follow-up question, and actually, Inquisitive Infidel in the chat has also just super chatted a very, very similar question. So I was going to leave this till later, but I'll bring it up now. Thank you, Inquisitive Infidel. But he asks, like, with these medical miracles, are the medical records surrounding the events, like, are they publicly accessible? Have you seen them or got hold of them?
So I don't know about being publicly accessible. What I'm going to show next is miracles that are in the peer-reviewed literature. And so I'm guessing that those will have them. But yes, here's the deal, guys. I think if you truly want to know if God exists, this is a very small hurdle to go through, which is to verify these miracles. And there's plenty to choose from. I'm using the ones that have had the most impact on me. I'm using the ones that were either, documented at the Mayo Clinic or caught on film. And I'm going to be showing the ones that are in the literature. But yes, the more we talk, you guys, you're going to start to hear from the doctors themselves. It's all there for you. So definitely. All right. If you want to share my screen, I'm going to give you guys 3 miracles that are documented in the peer-reviewed literature. This one is an amazing story. It says case report of instantaneous resolution of juvenile macular degeneration, blindness after proximal intercessory prayer. This story I just love. I just forgot her name, which is terrible. But she was blind. She was blind starting at the age of 18. She got married and she had a daughter, never saw what her husband looked like, never saw what her daughter looked like, and she was completely blind for 12 years. One night, her husband was praying for her and prayed for God to return her sight. And when she opened her eyes from that prayer, she had full vision. And she saw her husband for the first time. She saw her daughter for the first time. This one is an incredible story. You can start here in this journal article if you'd like, but there's plenty of videos online of her being interviewed, her husband being interviewed, etc. Next is this one, case report of gastroparesis healing, 16 years of a chronic syndrome resolved after proximal intercessory prayer. This one is unbelievable, okay? This one is about a boy who was born with a paralyzed stomach. This is an incredibly rare condition. He can't even take water in because of his stomach. So as a baby, they had to insert a tube into his intestines for everything, including water. So he never had anything go in his mouth. He never knew what food tasted like. All food had to go straight into his intestines through this tube in his stomach. And he lived on formula, even into high school. He played on the basketball team, and at timeouts, he would have to inject water into the tube, into his stomach. He never could put anything in his mouth. A man who also experienced a miracle, which is a story for another time, decided to pray for him and said, I want to pray for your healing, and put his hand on his shoulder and prayed for God to heal him. And he felt an electrical shock go through his body. His mom, who was there for this prayer, noticed the tube on his stomach start to vibrate. After the prayer, he said, Mom, I'm healed. And she's like, I believe you. They called the doctor because they didn't know what to do. And the doctor said, we can't see you for a few days to get you in. So they booked an appointment and they went out to dinner. And he tasted food for the first time in his life as a teenager and had no issues whatsoever. They went in, they told the doctor what happened. The doctor obviously probably thought they were crazy and said, this doesn't happen. People can't heal. You have like one of the most rare conditions in the world. And then he said, I've been eating every day waiting for this appointment. So they checked him out and they said, I guess we'll remove it. So they removed his tube and he's had no issues ever since. This last one here is case report of 11 years of severe malabsorption, muscular atrophy, seizures, and immunodeficiency resolved after proximal intercessory prayer. Again, I'm trying to appeal to those of you that are scientifically minded. I'm trying to give you an abundance of evidence so that you can be satisfied. So there's plenty for you here to read. I do want to mention something which is very significant, which is some people will try to say that all of these miracles are coincidence, which is not valid. And the reason it's not valid is there's a common theme here, which is these miracles happen at the moment of something like prayer or a baptism or someone laying hands on you and praying for your healing. That correlation cannot be ignored. And I just want to throw that out there before anybody is tempted to say, hey, this is just a coincidence. So you can go back to us, Al, and I just want to get your final thoughts on this before we move on to the next one.
Hang on.
And I can't see us, by the way, because I think we're switched full screen.
Yeah, neither can I. I don't know what I've done there. I think I've got to do that. Yeah, sorry. My tech skills aren't up to it. Okay. First of all, we had both Brenda and 99 Super Series have just dropped a couple of super chats with some points and questions in that I want to thank you both for doing that. I do want to thank you both for doing that, but I'm going to present those to Will in like the question and answer bit that will be coming up soon. So I won't put them on screen now, but they will be the first ones to come up. And thank you. You also remember, do not. Oh, and Unflat Earth has done the same. Thank you. But you don't have to super chat for me to put a question up. Just you can ask questions for free. But thank you to those who have. Okay, Will. I mean, you probably know what's going through my mind when you've shown me all that, right? I truly believe that you believe those, right? And you know what? Wouldn't it be amazing? I would love to believe that they actually happened. So right now, obviously, I don't believe, and I am going to go and research them, and I am going to come back, and maybe during my research, maybe I'll find out that, oh, hang on, I can't find an explanation for this. I can't figure out what's gone on. And then obviously we have a different conversation. Okay. But if when you were doing your flat earth interviews, for example, if somebody had said to you, well, I saw a house from 600 miles away, across the ocean kind of thing. It's difficult to believe that, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? How would you react if a flat earther had said that? I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of in that position.
It's all about evidence. So I'm not asking you to take my word for it. All of this is documented, and there's just so much evidence. I think if you actually look into it, you will be convinced.
Well, I am going to look into those. And I think when I do the response, I don't know whether I'll do the response as standalone videos or a stream, because there's been a lot here, but I want to start on the miracle bits because they sound like they are really fascinating to look into. So I'm going to start on that bit for sure. Absolutely for sure. And obviously right now I can't say anything about them, but can I just ask again, what was the name of the journal?
Which journal?
You showed 3 journals with the individual stories. What?
One second. I wish I knew. Hold on. One of them is complementary therapies in medicine.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is called Explore, I believe. And one of them is Advanced Mind-Body Medicine. Brilliant.
It just helps having that because one of the things I'm going to look at is the other types of paper, they print. So if they seem like really legit and genuine, that adds a layer of legitimacy to it. But if they print papers like Mickey Mouse has come down and on the Silver Surface surfboard or whatever, and then obviously I can discount it a little bit. But I absolutely am going to start there when I start going through everything you've said, and I appreciate you putting all that together. Was that the last point, or was there one more?
Yeah, I'll just say this: the lady who was cured of her blindness when her husband prayed for her at that exact moment and saw her husband and her daughter for the first time is Marilyn Ford. Marilyn Ford, and again, tons of interviews with her. She's the sweetest lady you'll ever see.
Right. Okay. I'm going to enjoy looking at those stories. A little bit investigative. I'll put your PowerPoint back on.
Okay. Again, I'm building a cumulative case here. We looked at the just the testimony of how many people who claim they've had these experiences with God around the world. How there is no explanation for the origin of life currently. How there's no explanation for consciousness, how that arose. We just looked at miracles, which I believe are absolutely confirmed and verified. And now we're going to look at out-of-body experiences. So this will touch a little bit into your question about the soul and kind of where is it and what happens. Out-of-body experiences. So in my opinion, out-of-body experiences are impossible if naturalism, materialism, physicalism is true. And an out-of-body experience is where someone's soul is separated from their body. And this includes a continuity of consciousness while the soul is separated from the body. Just like miracles, Al, it's crucial that I know what you would accept as convincing evidence that an out-of-body experience occurred. It's far too common for people to either reject and refuse any evidence that contradicts their beliefs, or to say that specific evidence would convince them they are wrong, only for them to move the goalposts once presented with the exact type of evidence they said would convince them. So what would convince you that an out-of-body experience actually occurred?
Okay, a couple of things to say on that then. I don't tend to be convinced by anecdotes. So because anecdotes are too easy to, just to throw into the mix. But if there was a situation where somebody had an out-of-body experience and not that they heard a conversation in the same room, because I think, perhaps if you're unconscious, you can still perceive things and maybe place yourself like mentally, almost like lucidly, dream that you're above your body, but you're still hearing and sensing what's going on in the room. That wouldn't be. But if somebody maybe like had an out-of-body experience and then traveled, to somewhere a decent distance away and then came back and could give firm evidence that they'd been there, but it wasn't an anecdote. And I don't know how how we'd prove it wasn't an anecdote, to be honest. But if it wasn't an anecdote, then that would be certainly bordering on proof of a soul or a spirit or something like that for sure.
Okay, cool. I'm not saying you're doing this, but I have had a lot of people try to discount what I'm about to present as anecdotes, and I think that that's just an excuse. The good news is that data, if you look at data, it's actually just a lot of anecdotes. And so the good news is there is plenty of out-of-body experiences that are fully documented. Once again, these are in the literature, and there's a lot of science behind this. So this one's going to be fun. All right.
Before you get into that, I will say, in terms of people experiencing out-of-body experiences, I do believe that people can have that experience, just that the cause for it isn't supernatural. It's more, kind of like perhaps similar to a lucid dreaming state. Maybe I'm not a psychologist or whatever.
Sure.
Topped up with perceiving things, that you can hear and smell in the same room.
Yes, but there would be something that would be impossible to happen, right?
Oh, there would absolutely be things that are impossible to happen. If somebody had an out-of-body experience and phone me up and said they can see, that I've got clown shoes on under this desk and I've got clown shoes, that kind of thing, I'd be like, okay, that's impressive.
Now we do have to be careful, right? And I'm not saying you're doing this, but we can't say that something very specific has to happen for us to accept it, right? Like, what's a good example? Like for example, a flat earther can't say, unless someone on the ISS takes this camera and spins it 360, I won't believe. You can't be that specific. So I think I'll meet your burden here for sure. And I'll give you resources that if I don't, definitely will. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. I want to start with Dr. Michael Sabom. He says this: I think skepticism is good, true skepticism, but rigidity is not. In other words, if you have an ideological opposition to something and you fight it tooth and nail to support it and refuse to look at the other side, that's not being objective. I think he's right here. And by the way, this guy was a doctor who came into believing that people have out-of-body experiences, kicking and screaming. When he first heard about it, he said it's hogwash. And then he looked into it some more and was like, okay, there's something here. All right, we're going to talk about Pam Reynolds. I'm going straight for the strongest out-of-body experience argument that there is. She had a large aneurysm near the brainstem. And so she underwent a standstill operation. Now, I didn't know about these until I was researching out-of-body experiences. And if you don't know what this is, which is probably most of you, it is unbelievable. It's called a deep hypothermic circulatory arrest. And what they do in this surgery is wild. They lower your body temperature. They drain your brain of blood. They stop your heart. And they essentially make you clinically dead so that they can operate on this particular area of the brain. It's only safe to do for less than an hour. And the younger you are, the greater chance you have of surviving this type of a surgery. But it gets crazier. So in a standstill operation, your eyes are taped shut. They drain all the blood out of your brain. There can be zero blood in your brain for them to do this. They put earplugs with speakers in your ears that emit 100 decibel clicks, I think every 1 or 2 seconds. And the purpose of that is to make sure that you have no brain activity whatsoever. So they're monitoring your brain activity with an EEG. And if you hear something, your brain lights up and they can tell on the EEG that you still have brain activity. So they do this until the blood is drained from the brain and the brain activity completely stops. And they keep doing this throughout the entire surgery. Then they lower your body temperature until your heart stops beating. That's how low your temperature gets. And they're trying to get your heart to stop beating, because what good is it taking the blood out of your brain if the heart is going to pump it back into it? She watched her operation from outside and above her body during a standstill operation. She heard the conversations taking place, including that her right femoral artery was too small. She described the instrument that the surgeon used as reminiscent of an electric toothbrush, which, by the way, was true. The cardiologist that first interviewed her said, I don't even know what that instrument looks like. She described the tray next to the surgeon as having interchangeable blades, which was also true. Dr. Carl Green was in the operating room for her surgery. He's a neurosurgeon. He was assisting Dr. Spetzler, who was actually doing the operation. And he said this. He said this when she came out of this a couple days later. She began to describe some details about her operation. And as she spoke, I became spooked. She talked about her blood vessels in her groin being cannulated and being too small. She talked about her heart being shocked twice, giving me details that she just shouldn't know. We'll come back to him. So this here is the strongest out-of-body experience that I'm aware of. So I want to get your thoughts.
So again, taken on face value, I have no problem believing that she heard those conversations. Okay, well, no problem believing, no problem believing that.
Hold on, you have to have a problem. She has 100 decibel clicks every 2 seconds in her ear.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, blocking out the sound. The thing with the electric toothbrush, was she describing how it felt, or how it sounded, or how she thought it sounded, or was she describing like its physical appearance?
She described both how it sounded and the physical appearance.
Okay. So again, taken on face value, then obviously that's something that I wouldn't be able to explain. Taken on face value, of course I would. Okay. So that has to be on the list for stuff to go and look at. I mean, I said at the beginning of the stream, lots of it would. And I will keep to my word. I will come back and do another stream, and I'll look into all of these stories. I might even have to split it over a couple of streams because there's a lot. Yeah. But now, I will have a look.
I believe the BBC did a documentary about her. There's plenty of videos of her being interviewed, Dr. Spetzler being interviewed, Dr. Green being interviewed. So there's plenty there for you to go and look at. But the key here is that she had no heartbeat, no brain activity, no blood in her brain, eyes taped shut, and then the sound in her ears. And she literally just watched the surgery take place above her body. So,
okay.
Right.
Okay.
All right, let's move on. Okay. Up next is Dr. Sam Parnia is our next expert here. He's the professor of medicine at NYU Grossman School of Medicine. He's the director of critical care and resuscitation research division at NYU Langone Health. And he's the director of Human Consciousness Project at the University of Southampton, UK. He is the main investigator for the two prospective studies. One is called AWARE-1, which is what you're looking at. And the second one is AWARE-2. I believe he's working on AWARE-3. These are prospective studies into these out-of-body experiences. Some people call them near-death experiences. He calls them recalled experiences of death. And the data, the purpose of the data is because there were all kinds of theories to try to explain these away. And I want people to just right now, just try to step aside and set aside your biases and look at your heart and say, what am I doing with the information that Will is providing? Am I just trying to fight it, or am I open to whether or not it's true? People that were having knee-jerk reactions to these out-of-body experiences started coming up with all kinds of theories, like it's oxygen on the brain, or it's because they're religious or whatever. And so these studies refute all of that. There is no current explanation for the data for these experiences other than their legitimate out-of-body experiences. Up next, we have Dr. Pim van Lommel. He was a cardiologist for 26 years. And in 1988, it's a long time ago, he initiated a prospective study of near-death experiences across 10 Dutch hospitals. And in 2001, results from this study were published in The Lancet. The Lancet is a very prestigious journal. And then in 2007, he published his book, Consciousness Beyond Life, The Science of the Near-Death Experience. Now, here's his study in The Lancet. This is probably the best study that's ever been done on these. And I'm going to tell you something fascinating, which is that they didn't want to publish his study. But the reason they did was because they said the science was just too good. It was just too good. And so anytime people come to me with some sort of an explanation to try to explain these, I usually turn them to this study, because this study will shows that there is no correlation for what they're talking about. The only thing that makes sense of all the data is, again, that they're actually having an out-of-body experience. Now, what makes these such a strong evidence of the fact that we have a soul and that there are supernatural things that exist is something called veridical perception. This is the term in the literature. IANS, which is the International Association of Near-Death Studies, defines veridical perceptions as this: experiences in which a person sees, hears, or otherwise perceives something when they shouldn't be able to, given their physical or medical state at the time. So this, to me, is the strongest evidence for out-of-body experiences, is what's known as veridical perception. Now, there is a doctor named Dr. Bruce Grayson. He was brought into this, again, against his will, so to speak. He had a situation very early on in his medical career where he was in the hospital cafeteria eating spaghetti, and his pager went off, and he spilled spaghetti on his tie, and he couldn't get it off. And so he put a white lab coat over his tie because he didn't want people to think that he was a slob or disrespectful or whatever. So he covered it up. A female brought in her female roommate who was unconscious, and they were working on trying to revive her. And he had to go tell her female roommate outside the room updates on what was going on. And at one point in time, when he was speaking with the roommate, he unbuttoned his lab coat. Well, the next day when he came into work, she was conscious, and he checked on her, and she said, "Hey, I remember you from yesterday." And he's like, "Well, I don't know how you could remember me. You were unconscious, and I only visited you very briefly." And she said, "No, I remember you talking to my roommate." And he said, "Well, that was down the hall." And she's like, "Yeah, I know, but you had a stain on your tie." Now, this bothered him tremendously because she talked about the conversation he had with the roommate, which was outside the room down the hall. And she knew about the stain on the tie, which he was trying to hide from everyone. So he didn't even tell his wife about this because he didn't want her to think she was crazy. And he ended up finding a book by Dr. Raymond Moody, which was called Life After Life. And he started to learn that people have out-of-body experiences. So he started researching this and came to the conclusion, you can't explain this away. He now has a book called After: A Doctor Explores What Near-Death Experiences Reveal About Life and Beyond. Now, there is a book called The Self Does Not Die, which has hundreds of confirmed and verified out-of-body experiences. And here's a quote from the book. "All the cases in this book involve confirmation by someone else, which clearly excludes the possibility that the presentation of a case and its anomalous aspects is based on the supposed bias or memory flaws of the NDE, or the near-death experiencer." If you honestly want to know the strongest evidence that we have a soul and people do have out-of-body experiences, I would get this book. They have a very high threshold to make it into the book. They have them categorized by who verified it, how many people verified it. And so here is an incredible resource for people to look into if they want to see these cases, and they're all documented. So what are your thoughts on out-of-body experiences?
So obviously, I mean, again, taken at face value, all very, very impressive. Again, I've got no issue with people perceiving things in the room that around them, and you know, I think we've gone over that. Those stories taken at face value, I wouldn't be able to explain, obviously. So again, I'm just going to have to give you what my answers are once I've had time to research those individual cases. Okay, but if they are exactly as you say, then that's going to be very difficult to explain. But you can imagine me being a little bit cynical. And I believe that you absolutely believe them. I don't think you're trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes, but maybe have you missed something? Is there some angle that maybe you've missed? I don't know. That's what I'm going to try and look for. Okay.
Cool.
Is what I can say.
And I do want to say something super fascinating, which is that in the realm of these out-of-body experiences, most of the experts, as far as I can tell, are not religious. So here's what I've seen is that the professionals that actually look into them, they end up becoming on board. Michael Sabom, Sam Parnia, Pim Van Lommel, Bruce Grayson. There's a long list of people that actually go and look at it, and they're like, there's no explanation for this. So I'm excited for you to do that.
Yeah, no, so am I. And I'm definitely going to start with the miracle bit and the out of body experience bit. That'll be a lot of fun to look over.
Okay.
Can I ask a cheeky favor?
Yeah.
Can you talk to the chat while I have a quick wee for 20 seconds next door?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yes. All right.
Sorry.
So everybody, I have not looked at the chat since the very beginning. I turned it off so I could not be distracted, but I am looking at it right now. And if you have something you'd like me to say or respond to or want to say something to me, I am looking. A Centaur, hi, how are you? Annie Purdue, hi. Savage, you're talking about, does it mean God did it? So that's an important one. Here's what I want to say. There is no natural explanation for consciousness. That's clear. Everybody agrees on that. There is no explanation for how matter can become conscious. So right there, that's a huge break in a foundation if you believe that everything's natural. So that immediately should tell you that something exists that is immaterial. The out-of-body experience shows that there's something in addition to our physical body, and that we have a continuation of consciousness that happens. And so that should tell you that there's probably an afterlife, and that you should definitely take this serious, because the life here on this earth is probably not all that there is. And if our consciousness continues after death, there's a good chance that it will continue for eternity.
Right, sorry for that. Too many.
No problem.
There was non-alcoholic Heinekens, and they were non-alcoholic. Anyway,
let me answer one more thing. Eric, you said, what about experts who aren't convinced NDEs are veridical? So that's not really a valid question, but I'll rephrase it to where I think what you're trying to say is, what about experts who aren't convinced that some NDEs have veridical perception? So not all NDEs have veridical perception. And I don't know of any experts who have looked into it and say, I don't believe that's what's going on. The evidence is just too strong at this point. We have too many cases that I think people are going to have to just say, I think everybody's lying. So if you want to find something like that, let me know, but I have not found that. All right.
Okay, before we crack on to the last bit, there are a couple of super chats that have come in. A lot of more questions directed to you, but we'll do the questions at the end. But I do feel like it's been a while now. I'd like to read them out before they leave the chat, but we'll come back to them in the questions section so you can respond if that's okay.
Yeah.
Get ahead. Otherwise, I feel a bit guilty that people have given them and they're not being shown. So Brenda Crate says, but Will said miracles don't prove God exists. So come back to that one later, but that's from Brenda. Super Seers says, the claim God exists is pointless. The only proof comes from a book that cannot be relied on, and the modern versions are all manipulated from the origin, even if the original was 10% accurate. I think you touched on that before.
I haven't mentioned this book yet. So good news is I've presented plenty of evidence. All right.
Again, you don't have to respond to these. I will bring them up again at the end so you can thoroughly respond. I just want people to know that I want to thank them for it and they've been on screen. But at the end, I'll bring them all up again and you can go at them. I wonder what medical miracles have historically occurred without the interference of godly intervention, from Unflat Earth 4660. Thank you so much for that. So again, we'll come to that at the end for Will's answer. Design Song 1, thank you so much. Will, I have it on faith that all of the miracles brought up were done by Quetzalcoatl. I don't know that. Is that an American thing?
Never heard of it.
In learning more, or why? Have you heard of Quetzalcoatl?
Never heard of it.
Never. Right, that's something else for me to research. Thank you, though, for design, Songwon. The Total Moves says the International Knitting Club. I've got this thing where people who dowse with rods, I call them the Advanced Knitting Club in my videos. It's just that's what that's at. Told me at Super Chat. Well, thank you so much, the Total Moves. Super Seers again. If God exists based on the Bible, it's not a God worthy of worship. God created this game and us, and then demanded us to play his game or we suffer. Religion isn't based on promise of greatness, but in fear. Again, I know, Will, you're probably dying to respond to these. I promise in the question and answer, I'll bring them all up again, and you can thrash them out. Inquisitive Infidel, thank you so much. What does Will think of reincarnation stories from Indian children or NDEs from other religions? That's a good question. Thank you, everybody, for that. I will bring those up again so Will can properly respond at the end of his presentation. So you'll get his answer to those. But again, you do not have to spend money to Super Chat for me to put your question on screen. You don't have to do that. But thank you to those who have. And I see Spinner's just dropped this. Does Witsit in fact get it for both? I don't think he does. Okay, right. So we're caught up with them. I'll show you those at the end so you know what questions are coming.
Okay,
back to you.
Let's do my final argument. All right. So I want to talk about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I believe this is a very important one, as I believe that this is the reason people can be saved and spend eternity in heaven. When it comes to the historical claim that Jesus rose from the dead, I think whether or not someone accepts this first comes down to what standard they have for whether or not something in the historical record occurred. So, Al, how do you assess historical claims, specifically in regards to ancient history, and determine the veracity of those accounts?
You know what? When it comes to biblical stuff, this is where
biblical, just ancient history in general.
How do I assess historical claims specifically in regards to ancient history? That is such a good question. I mean, archaeological evidence, if it's supported by archaeological evidence, if it is, if there's evidence that the documents around those claims have been written at a time, not written 500 years later, for example, but were written at the time and that they're authentic. It's difficult. I'm not really a history buff, and I've not really thought about that before. That I've given a really crap answer to that. Sorry. If a better answer comes to me,
I'm trying to prove a point here, which is that most people accept history at face value, and they don't have a standard, but they reject the resurrection of Christ. And I think that that's inconsistent. Like, I'm guessing you've never had any issues with Roman history and who was the first Roman emperor and all of that.
No, that's a fair point. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We can move on. Okay. So as I mentioned at the beginning, my goal with this discussion was to make my best effort to appeal to the science-minded, as you are a science teacher, and your audience is most likely very science-minded. I would like to make an argument for the resurrection of Jesus utilizing a scientific principle that most people hold today, and that is uniformitarianism. So uniformitarianism is the idea that the natural laws and processes that operate in the world today have always operated in the past. Some consider uniformitarianism that it should be a required first principle in any scientific research. Now, we can sum up uniformitarianism as the present is the key to the past. Now, I realize that there's going to be a difference here. And so what I'm suggesting here, and I did come up with this on my own, is a form of supernatural uniformitarianism, if you will, that the present and the supernatural events that happen in the present are the key to the past. Although extremely rare, resurrections still happen on occasion today. Now, I want to speak to anybody listening right now. If your first thought when I say that is, no, they don't, that proves right there you're not interested in the truth. If I say resurrections still happen on occasion today, and you don't believe me, if you're searching for truth, your reaction should be, I don't believe you. Where's the evidence? it shouldn't be no, they don't. Okay, so that's just a good way for us all to check ourselves and to see, do we really want evidence, or are we completely closed and shut down? Okay, let's do the evidence. So this is Dr. Chauncey Crandall. He's a world-renowned cardiologist from Palm Beach, Florida. He did his postgraduate training at the Yale University School of Medicine, cardiology training at Beth Israel Hospital and Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York, and he got a faculty appointment at Duke University. Let's talk about his patient, Jeff Markin. In 2006, Jeff collapsed from a massive heart attack at Palm Beach Gardens Hospital. He was pronounced dead after 40 minutes of failed resuscitation. Dr. Chauncey Crandall left the operating room as a nurse was preparing his body for the morgue. Dr. Crandall was walking down the hallway and heard a voice tell him to pray for Jeff. Dr. Crandall ignored the voice, and it came again a second time telling him to pray for Jeff. He went back to the operating room and laid hands on him and prayed for him. He asked the nurse to shock him one more time. She reluctantly did so, and upon shocking him, he immediately had a heartbeat. This is also documented in this series called Miracle on Angel. It's episode 8, if anybody wants to look at that. So, Al, we actually have a documented resurrection that happened today, and you can still talk to the doctor and you can still talk to the patient that it happened to. Any first thoughts there?
I mean, is it possible? I mean, it wouldn't explain the voices in the head, but is it possible this person actually just wasn't dead? You know what I mean? Like, is that a ridiculous thing to suggest?
I think so. There's plenty of interviews on YouTube where you can talk to both of them, listen to both of them. His body was black. I believe it's called cyanosis. And what's super, super fascinating about this particular one is what Jeff Markin said happened to him after this event. He described a place that sounds a lot like hell. So he essentially went to hell, in his opinion. And he said he knew he had died and he knew he went to hell. And he said that it was the most miserable place you could ever be. It was lonely. It was dark. There was no one to be with. There was no more relationships. And he was just devastated. So that's an interesting twist on this. A lot of people that look into out-of-body experiences hear a lot of stories of people going to a good place. That's not always the case. Jeff happened to go to hell. And by the way, he considered himself a very bad person. He was in love with his job. He was cheating on his wife. He was essentially not taking care of his 2 daughters. And so then we have, once again, a miracle that has a prayer happen at the exact moment. And we have Chauncey Crandall saying, I heard a voice, and the voice said, go pray for Jeff. And obviously there's no one around him. There's no one in a hall saying this. So clearly in his mind, it's God. He ignores it because he's like, this guy is dead. We've tried to resuscitate him for 40 minutes. They're already cleaning his body for the morgue. And then he hears it a second time. And he's like, well, if that's truly God, I can't disobey him. Goes back, prays for him. And then he comes back alive. And now his life is completely changed. As you can imagine, he's now a Christian. And so this is a pretty powerful experience in my mind that can't just be hand waved.
Okay, I'm interested. That's the second one that come from the Miracle series. Do you know who's behind the production of that?
I don't know, but it's a very powerful series.
Right, I'll track that down. And okay. You said I wasn't familiar with the channel you said it was on. Is that an American?
Okay, so it's put out by Angel Studios. And by the way, I'm going to make you an offer right now. I think you're going to have to pay to see it, and so I'm going to pay for you to see it.
Yeah, that's very kind of you. Very kind. I'll happily pay to see it, but that's very kind. Right. I will watch it. I will. And I
want to say one other thing. They have another documentary on Angel Studios. Angel Studios is kind of like Netflix, but it has more kind of faith-based stuff. There's another documentary called After Death, and it's all about these out-of-body experiences. And it's the #1 most watched Christian documentary of all time. So those are the two I would do: Miracle, which is a series, and After Death, which is a standalone documentary.
Okay, so it's interesting. I'm not saying that simply by association you
Sure.
can rule things out, but I am interested in the general standard of investigation that has gone on into all of the content. So I'll kind of binge watch the series and do some research on as much as I can on all of it.
I
For
love
sure.
it. Okay, so you're going to do research on that. I wanted to take a more scientific angle. What are your thoughts generally on just the veracity of the historical record behind the resurrection of Christ?
So I've done some. I think when we reached out on email first time, I think I said to you that I don't really know a great deal about the Bible, etc. I've never really been into it. So, but I will do some reading up, and I have done in the time since, and I've tried to look at maybe prophecies that were predicted, and the prophecies that have been used like as evidence for the Bible, and the way they've been debunked. And I know that a lot of the text are written kind of like centuries apart, and a lot of the accounts are written really far apart. I am not 100% sure on how long after the death of Jesus these accounts of resurrection were written. I have no idea. So, if they were written at the same time, that lends a little bit more weight. But, were they written a couple of hundred years later by people that were looking back at, already pre-written text? I don't know. So until I look at that, it's difficult for me to say. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, it does. I want to make an offer here, not to you, but I want to make this offer publicly. I have a friend who is the most well-read person I've ever met. He is incredibly young, and he's outread probably anybody that I've ever met, no matter what age they are. He's incredibly sharp. His favorite topic is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. His name is David Paulman. And I reached out to him before our conversation. I said, hey, if there was an opportunity to have a discussion with somebody on the resurrection, would you do it? And he's like, oh, I would love to do it. And I asked him if he would do it with me because he's way more of an expert than I am. So we don't have to do this because I know you're going to be looking into all these other things. But I do have an open beef with Paulagia, who a lot of your people probably are familiar with on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will, with my friend David, would love to have a conversation with Paulagia on this topic. I don't know if he'll want to do that, but I don't see why he shouldn't want to do that. So if anybody out there is fans of his or wants to reach out to him, that's an open offer. And then Al, you could watch it if it happens.
I did a collaboration video once with him years ago when I had my old channel. So I've only spoke to him, like years ago, once or twice, but he was a nice guy. I might still have his contact. And if I do, I'll reach out to him, but he might have forgotten who I am by now. And we're like, who's this guy? I don't know. So we'll see how it goes.
People reach out, maybe it'll happen.
Cool. Listen, I do want to give you the chance to answer those questions, and another couple of super chats have dropped in. I do want to say again, though, while we're doing this, you do not have to super chat to have a question read out. I do appreciate everyone who has, but you don't have to do that. But I will start with all of them, and I know a couple more dropped in near the end. We'll bounce through these because I know you've given me a lot of your time, but did you say miracles don't prove God exists?
No, okay. No, I have no idea what she's talking about.
Okay, so that's I'm sorry, Brenda's in the chat.
Well, let me say this again, because this might be where she's getting it. Just because myself or someone else can't explain why God does miracles in some instances and not others, that has no bearing on whether or not God exists. But the miracles are absolutely evidence of God.
Okay. That's more a comment, not a question, but how would you respond to the fact that the book can't be relied on, or the modern versions are manipulated?
Yeah, so this is a common theme, which is why I said if the entire Bible turns out to be false, that has no bearing whatsoever on the existence of God. The existence of God is standalone. And I think the evidence that I presented today is incredibly strong evidence that naturalism is dead and God is real.
Would it cause a problem for Christianity, though?
I don't think so. Here's an interesting issue, right? The fact that we have the term Bible has actually done a lot of harm to Christianity. It's probably done good, but it's actually maybe done more harm. And here's why. This was a beef I had with Apologia back in the day. Because like this guy refers to the Bible as a single book, then people can throw it out. It's not a single book, folks. This is super important. What we call the Bible is made up of separate, distinct historical documents. Just because people have collected them and put them into a collection and called it the Bible doesn't mean if you find something in one of the Gospels that you can throw out the entire Bible. Something in the Gospels that is false or whatever. You can't throw out the entire Bible. All of these books in the Bible are standalone historical documents, and they all need to be taken as such.
Is it what are your thoughts on kind of like Gnostic texts that didn't make the final cut of the Bible? I think is the best way I can put it. That are out there. Do you give any credence to them, or?
Well, no. But here's what I'll say. Again, I'm going to be the first to admit that because I'm the most familiar with Christianity, I know for a fact Christians have a ton of things wrong about God. They have a ton of things wrong about the Bible. They don't even know what the Bible is. Okay. You've got Catholics who have these books that they say this is the Bible. You've got Protestants that say, no, these books are the Bible. You've got Greek Orthodox say, no, you're both wrong. This is the Bible. Then you've got these crazy people called King James only, and they say only this English version is the Bible. So they don't even agree on what the Bible is. So when it comes to books, I take each historical document on its own, and I say, what evidence do we have that this is accurate and that this is true? Is there archaeological evidence to back it up, etc.?
Okay. Thank you for that, Super Seers, as well. Unflat Earth. So I think what he's getting at here is like, how many of these instances of people kind of like resurrecting, etc., have happened without any kind of
yeah. The answer is none. The answer is none. So things happen medically that are strange. Things happen medically that are hard to explain. People have diseases go into remission. All of that is accounted for. Again, as I've shown through the miracles that I chose to present today, and there are plenty more, these are happening at the exact moment of a spiritual event, such as an individual prayer, a baptism, someone laying hands on someone and praying for them, etc. People hearing a voice from God. These are not just random medical things that just happen to people and take time. These are instantaneous miracles. Barbara Comiskey had not walked in 7 years. She stood up and jumped up and down and was healed and had her vision restored and her MS gone. James Drain went in underwater, blind with MS, came out fully seeing out of both eyes without MS. The fact that these miracles are tied to these events means we can't take ourselves seriously if we're going to try to explain them all away as coincidences.
Okay, I'm going to have a heck of a time looking into all of these stories. I've got a lot of work to do, but I do appreciate it. I like the challenge. I just done a quick Google of what a Quetzalcoatl is, and it's missed 2 letters off the end. Quetzalcoatlus or something. It's basically a giant pterodactyl type thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how you want to answer that one.
So here's how I want to answer this. I want you to take me seriously right now, whoever's asking this question, which is this. I'm providing evidence, and I'm providing a cumulative case. There aren't millions of people who have had their lives transformed by Quetzalcoatl. So right off the bat, we're at a non-starter here. And so I want you to take everything that I've shown today and say, this is a model. Let's call it the God model, and say, what does the evidence fit? And I think the evidence fits into that God model, not some flying spaghetti monster or pterodactyl type thing.
Okay. Inquisitive infidel. What does Will think of reincarnation stories from Indian children or near-death experiences from other religions?
I can't speak to reincarnation stories from Indian children. I've not heard of them. I don't know if they're verified. I don't know if they're in the literature or not. Now, let's talk about NDEs from other religions. This is super important. I've never stated today that out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences only happen to Christians. I've never stated they only happen to atheists. Nothing could be further from the truth. They happen to everyone. And they've happened to a lot of atheists. They've even happened to atheist doctors, and I think even an atheist neuroscientist. And they're all transformed by this. They all are transformed because they've experienced it. And here's something really cool, which is that Muslims have NDEs and are on record seeing Jesus in their NDE. What makes that significant is the last one I heard about, he knew it was Jesus because of the holes in his wrists during his NDE. And he said the only reason that he knew that was because he had seen The Passion of the Christ, the movie that came out in the 90s. Now, Muslims do not believe Jesus died on a cross. The Quran explicitly states Jesus never died on a cross. And so a Muslim seeing Jesus with holes in his wrists does not match his religion at all. So take that into consideration.
Okay, right. I've lost where I was. That was inquisitive. We've done Brenda. We've done done design. International knitting club. We've done that, but that was to me. Thank you, the Turtle Moves. Oh yeah, I skipped one. That's why. Accidentally. So Super Sears, thank you so much again. So if God exists, and I've heard this argument a few times, he's not worthy of worship. He's created rules only to punish us, basically, and rule by fear. What's your thoughts on that?
Here's the good news is that I never said God exists based on the Bible. I didn't bring up the Bible. And again, it's so important for people to realize this. If the Bible is proven false, that has no bearing on the existence of God. So if people are coming to you and saying, I believe God exists because of the Bible, that's a claim that they're going to have to defend. And you guys can talk about that and go through with that. What I want people to see today is that naturalism, materialism cannot explain fundamental aspects of our existence. And all I want that to do is to open the door for you to realize, hey, I really need to look into this and check this out because I do think God is the best explanation.
Did you come to believe in God through the Bible, though?
That's a good question. So I was raised by a single dad who was not religious. But then he married my kindergarten teacher who was religious. So
Right.
at the age of 7, I am now in a religious home and we started going to church. I can't tell you what it was because I don't remember being that young that convinced me, but I will tell you that in my older life, I have, and this is going to be crazy to hear, but even as a Christian, I didn't have a strong relationship with God until the last less than 5 years. And so it was more up here. It was more logic than emotion. But I'm not going to talk about this today. I considered doing it, but I decided against it. I've actually experienced a miracle personally. And I was going to share it, but I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I might share it in the future. I've never shared it publicly. But that was a big thing for me. And also seeing what God has done for others. To me, this is, I call this Will's wager. Obviously, it's Pascal's wager, which I've never studied. But to me, it's not worth the risk. At a very baseline situation, why would you take the side of there not being a God where if you're wrong, you could end up in a horrible place for eternity? That doesn't make any sense to me logically. When I bring that up with people, they always like to say, Will, that's Pascal's wager that's been dealt with. And so I'm like, no, this is Will's wager. Respond to me about my wager. Why does it make sense when I've provided all this evidence for you to err on the side of, I'm still going to reject it, even though it could be horrible for me in the end? That doesn't make any sense to me.
I'll chip in on that one before we crack on with these, because to me, one of the things I was going to say at some point, and for some reason I didn't, is it would be amazing to believe, right, that there is that eternal life and there's all this supernatural influence in the universe and miracles are possible. And, you know, you go and see your loved ones after you die and all that kind of stuff. it's not a case of rejecting. Like when it comes to belief, it's inside you. Either believe it or you don't. So I'm starting thinking it would be great to believe all that, but I don't. Do you know what I mean? I'm not making a choice to go. No, I'm going to choose not to. It's in you or it isn't it?
Mhm.
In my opinion, I don't.
Yeah, I do think though that I do struggle with the logic of like, man, at least letting that sway you that if you're wrong, it could end up very bad for you. And this life on earth is just a blip on the radar. Like I have a new perspective on life, which is every single day I consider a gift from God. I don't believe this universe would exist without God that I get to enjoy every day. Life would not exist without God, which means I wouldn't be alive. So just the fact that I get to be alive, exist, and enjoy this universe is a gift from God. I don't understand, Al, why people would care about others. This is going to sound really weird. I don't understand why people would care about others if they don't believe in God. I don't understand why they wouldn't be purely selfish. If God's not real, and all there is just atoms and molecules and matter, why wouldn't you just focus on giving yourself the best life you can until it's all over?
Well, I can answer that, but I already know you won't believe me because it comes down to evolution.
Huh.
But essentially, animals started evolutionarily speaking, animals that were very closely related to each other started to cooperate. Basically, because if they could cooperate, then the children that shared the genes of that group, they call it like cooperative breeding, um, they would live longer and pass, if they could help each other survive, they could have more children, pass those genes on. And then that kind of expanded to animals just helping each other out in social groups, because then everybody kind of benefited, and it actually helped you pass your genes on even more. And then, we got our kind of like empathy and stuff, those kind of feelings to help gel that society, that desire for society together. But I know you don't believe in evolution. Well,
Well,
maybe you do. I don't know.
well, altruism makes no sense to me in light of evolution, right? Like if you give up your life for someone else, that stops evolution in its tracks, right?
Altruism, yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's perhaps a little bit of a byproduct, but nobody selects for altruism. It's not something that's selected for sure, because you're dead.
Yeah,
But,
I would die for my wife and kids. That makes
hmm.
no sense to me if I don't believe in God. Why somebody would die for their wife or children? It's your only life. Be selfish. There's no reason not to be.
But to have, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head there with wife and children. When it comes to childcare and being emotionally attached to those who you've passed your genetics onto, think about spiders, female spiders that let their babies eat them when they're born for food. Um, I don't think spiders have a soul and are thinking that way. That's driven by evolution. So I think evolution can answer that. But obviously, I get that you're going to come from different viewpoint. This one again, Super Seers. Thank you so much again. Why'd you call him Jesus Christ? His last name wasn't Christ. Where'd you go with that one?
Actually, his last name was Christ, and his middle initial was H. Okay, just kidding. Christ comes from the Greek word Christos, which is chosen one or Messiah, and so Jesus Christ is Jesus, the Messiah, the promised one. So it's just what everybody knows him as. He obviously didn't even have an English name, and so it's just easy to speak with what people understand.
Brilliant. Thank you. And deconstruction zone. Thank you, Dexter, for that. I'm assuming he's like an atheist debater.
Yeah, so his name is Justin. Somebody's been trying to set up a debate/discussion between the two of us. I immediately said, of course, and I haven't heard back. So I don't know if he doesn't want to or what, but I'm more than happy to talk to Justin at DZ.
All right, I'll check him out. I don't know him. Arnold, member of 24 months, and thank you so much for that. If Jesus was a carpenter, show me his birdhouses.
So this will surprise a lot of people. He may not have been a carpenter.
Really?
Yes, this is not really well known, but his family and he may have actually worked on stone versus wood, We don't know for sure, but when we look at the homes from the first century in Israel, they're predominantly made of rock. And so trying to understand what these Greek words mean is difficult. And so again, we have to use archaeology for that. Now, again, he may have been an actual wood carpenter as well. We just don't know.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Clarence, member 17 month. Thank you, Clarence. How does God decide? I know, I think you touched on this before, maybe.
Yeah, I'm glad he's asking, because I can't hit this enough. And so number one, Clarence, this is super important, is that you first deal with God's existence, right? What I hate to see is when people reject God because of who they think God should be. That is not a valid reason to reject God, because you think he should have done X when he did Y. God has a will. If God exists, I think we would all agree to be as wise and powerful as he is to create this whole universe, that he's obviously going to have good reasons for what he does. We can't even, we put all our minds together on this entire planet, and we're still trying to understand what we see out there. We don't understand all this stuff. We don't fully understand gravity, right? And so that's how brilliant God is. And so we have to realize, first, yes, this miracle happened. I'm not going to hand wave it. I'm not going to shut myself off. I do care about truth. Yes, the miracle happened. Yes, God exists. Then we can move on to these conversations of why God does what he does and why God refrains from doing what he refrains from doing. And those conversations are valuable and fruitful, and I don't mind having them. But the reality is they're going to be pure speculation. God has a will, and we can't know why he does what he does, why he doesn't do what he doesn't do unless he actually tells us. And so we can speculate, but the reality is, let the evidence speak for itself.
Okay, fantastic. This next one is going to be controversial. People are going to be going back looking through the transcript. I can't remember what you said, but Brenda is back. Thank you again, Brenda. When and this, do you remember she said before, you said miracle? I can't remember. Just let me get her other comment up, then we can look at both.
Okay, so this is awesome. I love this. I'm already being called a liar.
I'll just get the first comment up for anyone who's joined in, so they know what you're responding to, though. If that's okay.
That's fine.
She says that Will said miracles don't prove God exists, and you said you didn't. And I actually can't remember. But
all right,
yeah.
So
that's that.
I'm being called a liar, which is fine. People can see through bad arguments, and so I highly doubt there's anybody that's watching this that's processing this rationally and logically that thinks I'm lying. Might I have misspoke? Of course. Might I have forgotten something that I said? Of course, but I'm definitely not lying. Okay. So I didn't say miracles don't prove that God exists. That wasn't, I mean, I literally said, here are the 6 lines of evidence I'm presenting for God's existence, and miracles was one of them. So if I misspoke, I'm sorry, but please don't call me a liar. Calling someone a liar is a risky proposition, because you're acting like you know their intention, right? People say wrong things all the time. I've said wrong things all the time. That doesn't mean that they're lying. Lying means you're intentionally using falsehoods to deceive people. And that's a very strong accusation. I would lay off that. That's what flat earthers do to pretty much everyone.
Right. I'll see if I've got an eye on chat. I don't know if Brenda is in the chat, if she wants to respond. Again, you don't have, people are still super chatting. Please stop. You don't have to super chat to have a question asked, but thank you for that. This one, I don't even know what a star seed is. This is a bit of an in-joke on the channel. Are you familiar with it? So stars, no. You remember before at the beginning of the stream, I said I make videos about people that say ridiculous stuff. Well, some people think they either come from heaven or from other planets, but they have biblical download codes shot into their body that they can activate by speaking in tongues, and it will give them magical powers. And they're not actually humans. They call themselves star seeds. They charge hundreds of dollars an hour to teach people how to speak their light language.
Yeah, there's definitely frauds out there. There's definitely scammers out there, but we don't use them to determine whether or not other accounts are true. We got to base it on the evidence.
Yeah, I do a lot of starseed stuff, just having a jib at the people that, you know, sell these courses and stuff for hundreds. There's a lot of obvious what do you put it, like grifting there. In fact, I'm doing the Light Language World Championship 2 weeks tonight. Don't miss that one. Inquisitive Infidel, he said Pascal's wager, because we were talking about this before, but I can't remember where we were, leads to believing in a God that has the worst hell.
So I don't know what he means, but I do want to say something which I think is important, which is that I live my life based on my belief in God. And so let me explain what that means. It doesn't mean I'm right, okay? But I interpret the world around me, the entire universe, and myself through the lens of God exists. So here's an example. I don't look at the sun as a cosmic accident that's going to kill me if I'm not careful, right? If I didn't believe in God, I would think that. I look at the sun as something that God created for my benefit. And so I've looked into it, and I believe that we can increase our vitamin D levels through exposure to the sun and become healthier that way. And so that's an example where I live my life based on God existing, and I don't live in fear of the sun. Now, people generally, I don't know if generally is too strong of a word, but I see a lot of people that are afraid of the sun. They hide from the sun. There's a guy right now who my sister brought to my attention who's trying to live forever and not die. And I looked into him a little bit, and he takes an umbrella with him because he never wants the sun to touch him. And I was like, okay, he's toast. There's no way he's going to come anywhere close to living forever. I was on a boat once with a young doctor couple. They were both doctors. And I kid you not, I'm not making this up. Her hand was half exposed like this to the sun. And he was like, honey, what are you doing? And he like pulled her hand away, like, don't expose your skin to the sun. So it's just really weird. But I do live my life like this. Now, when it comes to relationships, I, believed that children are a gift from the Lord. And so I hear a lot of people looking at children as a burden. And people say all the time, I don't want to have kids because I want to travel. And I don't want to have the expense of children. There was a couple recently that's all over the news. They were celebrating their baby online on social media, showing pictures of the ultrasound thing. Look at our little baby, and talking about it. And then at 21 weeks found out their baby could have Down syndrome, and then aborted their baby. So they are like, you guys don't understand, like, this is going to be difficult for us, and our baby might have a heart defect down the road. Like, I look at children as a gift from God, and people that experience having a child are like, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I don't commit adultery on my wife because I believe in God. Okay. That's going to sound super weird, but I just don't understand why men would not sleep around if there's no God. Like, there's nothing in a man that in no man in the world is there this thing that's like, I only want to sleep with one woman for my whole life. Like, that's crazy. No guy thinks that. And so I do that. I do that because I trust God, and I trust that that is what's best. And I can tell you that it's incredible for our marriage. It's incredible for our children. And I believe I'm setting an example for my children for who they should look for in a spouse and for how their marriage should be. And you can see the devastation that's caused by adultery. And so anyway, that's a good example of where I do take believing in God serious, and it does affect my life.
Okay, right. We're almost there on these. Then we can get to the questions from the chat. There's just two more. Clarence says, your wager is wrong. It ties goodness to belief in God, and lack of belief inherently bad.
So no, it doesn't. The wager is this. If rejecting God's existence is going to put you in a bad place for eternity, which is way longer than a short time frame on earth, it doesn't seem to me a good bet to reject him and end up being wrong. If I believe in God and he turns out to not exist, all I have is what? People will say, I wasted my life. You're like, you're right. I wasted my life not cheating on my wife, having 5 children, loving my children, caring for others, doing altruistic things. You know what? You're right. I could have been more selfish and pursued earthly pleasures and lusts, and I am going to lose out on that. But to me, losing out on eternity is way worse.
And find one of these, and then if you do have time, we'll just go to a couple from the chat. But I know you've given me a lot of your time already. Me official, thank you so much. Your God created many people that truly do not have a belief in him or any gods. If he's so ego maniacal, why would he do that?
Okay, so I never said he was egomaniacal. There's a bit of a misunderstanding here, I think, which is I'm almost reading this as you think God created them to not believe in him, which is obviously not true. God has given everybody ample evidence that he exists. I showed it today. And so here's the reality. If any of us pass away anytime soon and we meet God, he's not going to do this. Please, I'm not tooting my own horn here. I'm just giving it a hypothetical example. He could easily point to this conversation and say, me official 228, whatever your name is, you watched Will's conversation with Culture Cats. You saw the evidence. You did not have answers for the evidence because there aren't any. You just rejected it because you didn't want to believe in me. And so you won't have an excuse. And so the reality is God created us with free will. And so people are freely choosing to reject the evidence. Yes, there's people that haven't been presented with it, which is a different story. I presented it to everyone that's watching today. And so at that point, it becomes a choice. The reason God created people with free will is because he wants love. And love, true love, must be freely given. You cannot have love, true love, without the ability to hate. Love is one of the most beautiful things on the planet. And when you think about why it's beautiful because that person chose to love you. If they didn't have a choice, it would mean nothing to you.
Okay, we've got two more here. I'm going to say we'll give it 10 minutes. I'll get through these next two, and then please, I really want to just get some questions from the actual chat. You don't have to super chat. Obviously, if somebody does super chat, I'm going to read it out. Obviously, I'm not going to not read it out, but you don't have to. So Inquisitive Infidel says, look up secular morality. You may understand.
Okay, so I have, and it just comes down to opinions. That's it. There is no objective morality if there is no God. Let me repeat that. There is no objective morality. Can you go back to that?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so that was the next one. Sorry.
There is no objective morality if there is no God. I'm going to tell everybody something right now that should make your jaw drop to the floor, okay? I watched a debate recently between Michael Egner, who is the neurosurgeon that I quoted, and Matt Dillahunty. And I could not believe Matt Dillahunty said this. But Michael Egner asked Matt Dillahunty if it was objectively wrong to sexually violate a child. And he used the R word, which I won't say. And Matt Dillahunty said no. And he said it forcefully. He said no. Because Michael Egner was trying to get him to answer it, and he was trying to avoid it. And he's like, you need to answer this, Matt. Is it objectively wrong to sexually violate a baby, is what he said. And Matt Dillahunty said no. So that is the true atheist position. There is no objective morality. It's just opinions and whoever forces their opinion on others. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that argument, and I think this is just my own personal take on that when theists are talking about objective morality, they're talking about something that's grounded in a divine being. Mm-hmm. For me, I would say it's objectively wrong, but I would define objectively wrong as not being grounded in a divine being, but something that objectively causes harm to people. That if you do that kind of thing, that child is going to suffer, and that's how I would ground it. But I kind of understand how that might have come about if Matt was saying, well, no, because objective morality itself doesn't exist because there is no God. I understand why he might have said that, but it's not something I think. It's not something I'd say. Okay, you are mocked has sent me this on Twitter. For some reason, it won't let it. I've had a couple of people say they can't send messages tonight. It's weird. Will, what kind of loving God gives Barbara MS at 15? Takes her walking, takes her sight, her breathing, her swallowing, bladder and bowel control, leaves her with oxygen, a feeding tube, and ileostomy.
Mm-hmm.
So it was. What kind of loving God gives a baby a paralyzed stomach at birth? And what about the millions of others praying while they suffer? Is God unable to help or just unwilling?
Mhm. Okay, so there's two parts to answering this. The first one is this is what I would call a tactic to avoid having to deal with the miracle itself. And so I want everybody to notice here what Chris is doing is he's not responding to the miracle. And that's because there isn't an answer to the miracle other than it's a miracle. Now, the questions are fair, except the view of God here is very misguided. And so God is not doing these things. He didn't create these diseases. He doesn't give them the diseases. Okay. We live in a very broken world. We live in a fallen world that is the result of sin. And again, sin is because God created us with free will. So to answer the second part, God didn't give these conditions to these people. Now, what's the last part he said? It's about, is it about not healing other people?
It was, and what about the millions of others praying while they suffer? Is God unable to help them or unwilling?
Yeah. So God has a reason that's valid for why he does what he does and why he does it when he does it, right? That the fact that we don't know what that is and can't figure it out has no bearing on whether or not God exists. I will tell you that these miracle stories that I gave tonight had years of suffering and pain in their lives, but God then eventually healed them. And so this isn't it's not that they didn't suffer, but the reality is, like, if you look at James Drain's miracle, he gave his life to God despite his misery. He realized that, being depressed and suicidal and an alcoholic and a drug addict because of his condition was not a way to live. And after going to church, gave his life back to God. He didn't ask for a miracle. He didn't ask to be healed. He just gave his life back to God and was like, I'm not going to let myself be like this anymore. Life is a gift. Even though I have been poisoned by methanol, I still am alive and I should be happy to be alive. And so then he was healed at his baptism. And it's an incredible story. I personally don't think Carissa Saber just thought on her own to go film it with her cell phone. They had never filmed a baptism at that church before. I think that she was prompted by God to do that. And he knew that this story would travel and reach people and reach the world. And so, again, miracles are rare in the Bible. They're rare today, but they do happen. And by the way, this is a lose-lose situation for God, which I want people to realize. If there were no miracles at all, you guys would come to me and say, see, Will, there's no God, there's no miracles. Then I bring miracles to the table and it's like, well, why doesn't God do a miracle for every single person and heal every single person right now? So what you guys are doing is you're not searching for God. That's all I want you to see, is that you don't actually care in your heart, I don't think, whether or not God exists. You're just trying to look for excuses to get out of it. So deal with the evidence. It's real. These miracles are real. Once you're there, then realize I need to submit myself to the all-powerful God of the universe. And at the very outset, trust that he's got a good reason for why he's doing what he's doing. And I'll figure out the truth later. And I can even speculate if I want, if that makes me feel better.
Okay, thank you for that. And you are Mop, the same guy that just asked you that. Top bloke, by the way. Go check his channel out. You are Mop, very good channel. Just wants to thank you for doing the stream. Super Seers, thank you. You've been with us all night, and thank you again. Could have a 6-hour debate with this guy. Well, I don't know if that's enough. I'll just see what Will says about that.
The only people I'm going to get in trouble with is my family, but I can't believe I'm going to say this right now. I really can't at this point turn down a debate on the existence of God and the veracity of the evidence and the truth of Christianity. If I get too many requests, I might have to stop doing that. But I do feel incredibly blessed by God. I am not looking for any miracles from God. God doesn't owe me anything. I did tell everybody that I experienced a miracle. Again, I live my life. Just the fact that God created a universe, made life so that I could exist and live is enough of a gift for me. I have a beautiful wife that I'm madly in love with. I have 5 beautiful children that mean the world to me. I am blessed beyond measure. And just that alone is enough reason for me to serve God and defend him for the rest of my life.
Right. Well, in that case, if I just share screen here, just very, very quickly, if you are interested, if you go on the channel up here where you've got all the blurb, you've got to do it on a desktop. If you click more, then there's a box here that says view email address. And if you click on it, you'll get my email address, and then I can hook you 2 up. And of course, wherever you want to do that, you can do that. Debate, and I will I will love watching that. Sorry. Icy Spin says, do you choose to love or do you just love generally?
Oh, I definitely think you choose to love. Definitely choose to love. Like, for example, if you can go back to that for a second.
Sorry.
If you don't choose to love, you could just marry anyone, right? It's why we have this phrase, falling in love. When you get to know somebody and you become attracted to them, you're making a decision. Wow, I really like this person. Okay, now I actually really love this person too. I want to spend the rest of my life with this person. Love is absolutely a choice.
And Super Series again says religion pushed him from God. And I think I said earlier on at the beginning that there is definitely a difference, isn't there, between believing in God, which I don't, if anyone's just joined the stream, and religion. And you've kind of touched on that as well tonight, Will.
Here's what I'd say to that. I feel bad. I honestly do feel bad because there's a lot of terrible things that have happened. There's a lot of bad people out there. I've been involved in exposing Christians who are liars and scammers and thieves and preying on the innocent. And it's all terrible, right? But again, I always have to come back to this fundamental reality, which is that God exists. And that's not going to be a good enough excuse when you meet God to be like, well, you had some bad people that were doing things in your name. And that's why I don't believe in you. It's not going to work, unfortunately. So I'm trying to come up with an analogy on the fly. And it might not be good, but it's on the fly. I brought up the Wall Street Journal article of the bad peer-reviewed science that's been published and how prevalent it is. Imagine if I said, I'm walking away from peer-reviewed science because of the people that do bad things. That wouldn't be valid, right? That should immediately resonate with you that I shouldn't do that. The bad apples don't ruin the rest of it for everybody else. And so I would say the same thing with religion. There's a lot of terrible things out there that are done in God's name, but don't let that ruin everything else.
Okie dokie. Right. Listen, Will, you've been here for over 3 hours now, or just about 3 hours. You've given me loads of your time. You give me loads and loads of stuff to another. Again, have a look at the link. I'll just put you in touch, and if it happens, it happens, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But
he has my email.
Oh, he's got your email. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Max. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you. UYU. What country is that? What currency is that? I've never heard of UYU. UU. But anyway, thank you for that. Right, you've given me loads of time, and I promised before we did this that I wasn't going to try and debate you. I wasn't going to try and push back at you. But what I would do is I'd listen to everything you say, and I would come back and I would answer it from a researched point of view, which I will do. The stream's gone on for long. It's going to take me ages to do that, and I might chunk it up into lots of mini streams. You've given me lots to do, but I appreciate it, and I hope anyone's watching. Obviously I don't believe in God. I'm absolutely an atheist, but I think this is how conversations in the flesh should go. Mm-hmm. So I've listened. I hope you just know that I've listened well, and I'm going to go and research it.
I think you're taking the absolute best approach to this. I believe that you're 100% sincere. You will do it, and that's all anybody can ask for. So thanks so much for having me.
No, I really, really appreciate you. There will be a follow-up stream. It will be at the end of July because I haven't got another Thursday. I can fit one in, and then until then. But when I come back, I will be well researched. I'm going to start with the miracles. I'm going to start with the out-of-body experiences, and we'll see what I can find. Just replying to you from earlier on. Please tell him he can't. Sorry, please tell Will that I can't force myself to believe in God. I never believed, and I'd be lying if I pretended. And I don't lie. And that's what I said before. Like, belief is something on the inside, isn't it?
Okay, so if you put that back up, it's weird to say that you can't force yourself to do something, right? Imagine if a criminal said, I can't force myself to kill somebody, so even though they're dead and even though my body did it, I can't force myself to do it. You can choose to look at the evidence and ignore it and suppress it and block it out, or you can choose to look at the evidence and say, this is pretty strong evidence. I need to reconsider what I believe. The evidence is there. And I'll end with this, which is super, super important. The one thing anyone can do that's truly searching for God, if they want to know he's real, is ask him. If you ask God to show you that he is real, he will show you that he is real. Now, I can't tell you how he'll do that. I can't tell you when he'll do that. But the hardest part here, and this is actually scary, okay? I'm making it sound easy. It's not. If you genuinely reach out to God and say, God, I genuinely want to know if you are real. Please show me if you're real. And in your heart, you actually want to know if he's real. He'll show you that he's real. So take that and think about it. I've told this to other people. They've done it and God has responded. I have no doubts that he'll do the same for all of you.
Okie dokie. Thank you for that. To end, Surrender Monk says, can will, can. I don't know what that means. Can you can, Will? Or will you can?
I cannot.
Me neither. Listen, thank you for doing this. I will come back and I will respond to all your points in a live stream. I really appreciate all the time you've taken to put that together. I hope you feel you've been heard out at least, and it's not been any kind of ambush or anything. And I'm sure we'll speak again, but thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Al. Bye-bye.
And thank you to chat. Bye-bye.